Good morning. I'm going to call this session of the Board of Revision to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. Our panel is composed of Mr. Robert Buss, who's farthest to my left, Linda McDad is to my immediate left. My name is Harvey Diamond. The City Assessment Department is being represented by Lindsay Warham, and our Administrative Assistant is Kara Balshaw. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment rules in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision have been requested are described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor may make in its hearing must be sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to those matters must be sworn in. Be advised, comparative assessments are not considered evidence by our board. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by council and is independent of it and the city administration. We make our decisions on the basis of the evidence that we hear and that alone, and we issue a written order that we mail to all parties as soon as possible after we conclude today. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to an application for exemptions from taxation. Should a party wish to appeal, the matter in which to do so will be included with our order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm matters to be addressed with each applicant before the swearing in. We will then hear the assessor's testimony, followed by any questions that the parties may have, that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by any questions. Each party will be given an opportunity to summarize if they wish to do so. Once all the evidence on the application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The person will repeat for any matter on the docket today, and after all the applications have been dealt with, we will close, we will deliberate, and we will render our decision as soon as possible thereafter. All information at this public hearing is live streamed and recorded and forms part of a public record.
Please state your name.
Lindsay Ware.
Do you swear the evidence you present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Please stand. Will you swear in today or affirm?
That's swearing.
Okay. Please state your name.
Steve Green?
Do you swear the evidence you'll present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Do you have anything to distribute?
No, not at this point. No, I don't think I'll need it.
Okay.
Mr. Reed, prior to proceeding, I see that you've indicated, you've also applied for, you're indicating that you're not liable for taxation and you want to withdraw that?
I do want
permission?
to withdraw that. I think that was a misunderstanding on our office.
Okay, we'll let you do that at this time.
All right. So I've prepared them. You can just check off the liability one at the
Okay.
bottom and just sign and date it.
On both of them?
Yes, please.
Okay.
That's just for the 2 years.
August 1st.
Yes. Perfect, thank you so much.
And Ms. Warman, as we have 2017 and 2018, and as they're based on the same assessment, I'm sure we can do them all together.
There are actually different levels of assessment, 17 and 18. 18 was a reassessment cycle, so
Oh, I see.
17 has a different level of assessment and a different rate.
Oh,
So they actually are different.
You know what, you're right, I'm sorry, we're doing 17, 18, not 18, 19. Excuse me, so we'll do the 17 first, obviously. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Okay, thank you. So we're looking at file number 18-93. This is for the 2017 business assessment. We're looking at business assessment ID 53501. The address is 421 St. Mary's Road, and the business name is Breathe Easy Eco Solutions, and the owner is SW Business Solutions Canada, Inc. I'm recommending to maintain the 2017 annual rental value, and I'd like to apologize, there's a typo on the bottom of that. It should read 34560. Just so everyone can correct that to make sure everybody's pages are correct. So it's 34,560. So like I said, the total annual rental value for 2017 is $34,560. We have a total square footage in our records of 2,622 square feet for an overall ARV per square foot of $13.18, including occupancy costs. If you look midway through the page at 421 St. Mary's Road, where it says the subject business identification number 53501, we have a premise area in our records of 2,622 square feet. We have a base ARV of $28,763 and a base per square foot ARV of $10.97. Costs in 2017 totaled $2.20. Occupancy costs total $5,768 for a total annual rental value added to the base ARV of $34,560. The current tenant was not the subject tenant at the reference time for the property, so I've noted that the previous tenant at the reference date was paying an annual net rent of $36,000. So that was the previous tenant in the subject location at the time of the reference date for 2017. So if you turn to page 2, you'll see my comparables. These are vehicle service garage comparables. Similar buildings to the subject, not all of them are vehicle service related, similar to the subject, and they range from $9 to $16.80 with a mean of $13.31 and a median of the comparables of $13.12. That's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Right now, if you have any questions of the assessor, you can ask them. Don't give your evidence, that you'll be able to do in a few minutes, but any questions can be asked now?
I don't actually have any questions.
You don't have to.
Okay.
That's fine.
I get how this works quite
Okay.
clearly.
Thank you.
Mr. Buss, do you have any questions of the assessor?
Yes, where is this property located?
This property is located on the east side of St. Mary's Road between Carrier Avenue and Fifth Avenue. It's on the same property as the St. Leon Garden Center, if you're familiar with that, near the Red Top Diner.
Yes, okay. That's all my questions.
Mr. Fenn, do you have any questions?
I have none.
I don't either. Okay, you can go on with your presentation, sir.
Okay, so my presentation is simply that the rent that was established for this property was established between two long-term business people who ran St. Leon's Garden for basically decades in this city, and SW Business, which is Breathe Easy Eco Solutions, are the company that my wife and I jointly own. So we sat down and we determined an accurate, what we consider to be accurate fair market value for the location based on the unique circumstances of that location, okay? These other locations, I'm familiar with some of them, and I do understand why the city would look at these locations and use these as comparables, but the key comparables in here from our perspective are have to do more with parking than anything else. We have no parking in that lot, and for 6 months of the year, the place is absolutely crazy with vehicles pulling in bumper to bumper in front of the garage doors, in all areas of that parking lot. It's a madhouse. So as a result of that, and they recognize that challenge, so as a result of that, they were looking for a tenant who could, for at least for half of the year, put up with a situation that existed there that would not impair the business at St. Leon. So I think that that's a unique circumstance for that building. It used to be a Sturgeon Tire. It smells like a Sturgeon Tire inside. It's not a place where you would want to take somebody for a meeting. It's not a place where we can receive customers, because for half the year there's no parking for customers to get in there. And that to me is a huge mitigating factor when it comes to discussing what the fair market value is for the rent. And to add to that, it's a little bit of there's a few other challenges there from that building aside from the smell of the interior of the building, which was also consideration in establishing the rent. Is that as it is an older building, the electrical is not, probably anywhere near where it would be if it was a newly or even a recently constructed building. There's no, you can't put a heater in the front. There's only a couple of gas heaters, one to heat the warehouse and one at the back. Those heating units won't heat the front where the lady, the office manager, spends most of her time. So there's not even enough to keep her warm in the winter. The assessment portion of it here does say on it, this came off the internet here, it says that we're being assessed with air conditioning. There is no air conditioning here, Okay, so I'm not sure where that came from, perhaps it was somebody else filled out a form, but we don't have air conditioning there. So that needs to be addressed. I have no reason to dispute any of the utility costs or the size of the building or any of that kind of stuff. I fully accept that, but the air conditioning part of it was, sort of a surprise to us. The building itself, if you were to walk in there, you'd see big holes in the roof. Last 2 years it's leaked, and that's between us and the landlord. And we've accepted a scenario where the building is just simply not equal to what the city might have looked at and said, this is an equivalent building. We feel that this is not an equivalent building to most places that are doing business. Most comparable tire shops and so on do have a place where you can go in and sit comfortably, and we don't have that. And the access itself is a one-way back lane. There's no parking in the back lane, so we have had to park and we do all summer long. We park on the street. We've had our tires flattened by neighbors who phone us and say, why is your vehicle out there on the street? Why don't you park in your own lot, and so on, and we just haven't got that access. The other thing I wanted to mention is the last year St. Mary's Road was torn up completely. The year before, it wasn't as bad, but it was also torn up in front of the building. So there's no parking, no reasonable parking. We oftentimes have to park 1 to 2 blocks away. I don't believe if you were to poll any of these businesses, that they have to go through those unique challenges.
Okay.
Okay.
Any questions, Mrs. Willer?
I just have one question, if you just give me a moment to write a couple of things down. So you indicate there's no air conditioning in
Right.
your property? The whole property or just part of the property?
We have 2 gas heaters, and other than that, we have,
So there's absolutely no AC in the entire property?
there's a window air conditioner that doesn't work very well, that we put in.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to adjust my number, please, if that's okay, in light of the fact that there's no air conditioning in this space,
Absolutely.
if that's all right. So I've removed the air conditioning costs from it, and so the new annual rental value for 2017 that I'm putting forward today is $33,600. So I've just taken, so for the owner who knows, I've taken your premise area and I've multiplied it by the rate of 30 cents for the air conditioning to come up with $787, and I've just removed that from the total occupancy cost of $5,768. So it works out to $4,981 without the air conditioning. So we've just added that to the base ARV.
Thank you.
Okay, so that reduces the total operating cost to $33,600?
The total operating costs end up being reduced to $4,981.
Oh, okay.
And then the ARV is the $33,600.
Right, okay.
And that's for 2017, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I'll have to do the same calculation once we get to the 18 one.
Anything else?
I have no questions other than that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Ms. McFadden, do you have any questions of the applicant?
Excuse me, what is the rent that you're putting forward?
The rent in 2017, I have that here, $2,185 per month, plus the appropriate taxes.
You don't know what that is per square foot?
I don't know, I didn't do the math for the square foot, but I can tell you for the 2017, the total was 26,220.
26,220.
220.
Okay. Thank you. And Mr. Green, what type of business is this?
We're a mold and asbestos remediation business.
Okay, so I'm a little confused why all the comparables are vehicle service.
Because the building is actually an old vehicle service garage and the shape of the building is still vehicle service, so what we have to do is, because the outside of the building, if Mr. Green's business was to leave, it would still be considered a vehicle service because not a lot of renovation has been done.
Okay.
So the comparables are called vehicle service garage, similar to Mr. Green's property, but a lot of them, some of them are actually vehicle service related, but some of them are also tenants similar to Mr. Green who occupy a similar type of building.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Nope, that's fine, thank you.
Okay, so you went into this business I guess, in 2017?
Well, we've been.
In this location, I mean.
In this location, 2015, I think we
Oh,
moved.
2015.
And we established a 3-year rent, or agreement, and then we just re-signed for the optional 2 years. We've just added, gone there, and they have increased our rent by 8.4% for halfway through 2018. Let me just think, 15, 16, 17, 18, yes, that's correct. So we rented there in the middle of 2015.
So how long were the premises vacant when you took over?
That I wouldn't be able to tell you. They were vacant, it wasn't a move-in, move-out. We had a number of months to prepare, which is what we needed to do. We had been on the south perimeter, and we had to move equipment and our supplies and things like that for doing the work that we did.
And you negotiated a significantly lower rent than the previous tenant had.
I didn't know what their rent was. This was the first I heard of it. So what we did was, when we talked to them about it, what we said was, look, you've got a unique circumstance here. They had put up an ad on Kijiji and a couple of other places, and what they were receiving was interest from primarily small car sales places. And those places would have used up parking. Almost any place would have used up parking, any tenant they were considering. So to them, we were, our flexibility was quite, it was quite excellent.
Yeah, because you don't have to have customers coming there to work on their things there.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And we are not bringing in truckloads of moldy and asbestos-laden things into the building. We do have supply deliveries, of course,
Yes.
and the challenge and the number of hours that I'm paying staff for, even just trying to block off and stop people, and you have to be, they're gotta be civil to people,
Okay, you've answered that. The next question I have is, do you pay, besides the rent, any utilities?
Yeah, we pay all the utilities.
Pay all the utilities,
Yeah.
so the occupancy costs as well,
Yeah.
as your rent?
Yeah.
Okay, I think I've answered those questions, thank you. Do you have another question before you look at me?
I didn't get my turn yet for questions.
Oh, sorry, I thought I had.
I just have one easy,
Sorry,
simple
go
one.
ahead, I'm sorry about that.
Do you have signs out certain area, like no parking here because?
No, we thought about doing that, but we're trying to work with our landlord, right? And if we have to, we can do that. We have what we call sawhorses. They're like sawhorses that say no parking. If we have something specific that's coming that needs to block off one, we can. But our staff parks on the side streets all summer long. We can put those out, but we try not to, because it's part of the cooperation deal we have with City.
So when you were leasing from the owner, it was sort of understood that you wouldn't be taking much parking?
They gave us 4 parking spots in the front. No, we don't use them. We leave those for their customers in the summer. And that's only on the weekdays, and on the weekends, according to the terms of the lease, we have no parking spots on the weekends. So our vehicles have to be on the street.
Thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Does anybody wish to make a summation or proceed with the next one?
I think we're okay, thank you. Mr.
Okay, we can go on then with 2018.
Yeah, as long as that's okay with the owner.
You don't have, yeah. No. Okay.
So on the 2018 one, in light of the fact that there's no AC, I have revised the annual rental value. So I've removed the occupancy cost of air conditioning. So the new total occupancy costs are $5,323. And the new total annual rental value with costs is $37,140. So for this property, again, it's still 421 St. Mary's Road. This one is file number 18-94, same business assessment ID of 53501, and the same business and owner's names of Breathe Easy Eco Solutions, owner SW Business Solutions Canada, Inc. Again, we still have 2,622 square feet with a base ARV of 31,805 for a base annual rental value per square foot of $12.13. We have total occupancy costs of $5,323, and there is no air conditioning in the building as per the owner. And the new annual rental value requested and put forward by the City of Winnipeg Assessment Department is $37,140. The subject lease information we received from the owner on the income and expense mailer for 2015 is $26,220 of annual rent that they pay. If you turn to page 2, you'll see comparables. They range from $9 to $16.80, with an average of $12.41 and a median of $12. Again, a number of these comparables are vehicle service related properties. None of them are big service related like the Midas or the Mr. Lubes. They're all sort of small business vehicle service repair, and some of them are even, one of them is an installation company, so they're just similar property types as the subject. Those are my, that's my presentation.
Thank you. Now, everything you said last time,
It still applies.
it still applies, so you don't have to say it again. If there's anything else you want to add to it, absolutely go ahead. Or no, sorry, you have questions to ask.
No,
Do you have any questions,
no,
Stan?
I'm good, it's, yeah, again.
Okay, we would have questions, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
okay? Mr. Buss, do you have any questions for the assessor?
Thank you, yes. On your comparables, the net rent per square foot for these properties,
Okay,
how does that relate to the overall ARV, or is that
it relates to the base ARV.
base ARV?
So the overall ARV per square foot is including the occupancy costs with it. So the comparables that we're showing would relate to the base ARV per square foot because the occupancy costs are all the same across for all business assessment.
That's right, okay. Another question, it seems to me that the parking's a bit of a problem. Is that something, like they're paying less rent than what you think it should be in accordance with the comparables? Do you think parking is a bit of a problem now?
Because I haven't inspected the site, but according to the owner, they don't have parking. And I would understand that because there is a garden center there and people are going there for a farmer's market and things like that, that it could be an issue for their business. Because I haven't been there to look at it, I can't really speak to how much of a problem it is.
Okay, that's all my questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Ms. McFadden?
Ms. Wareham, that was actually my question, whether or not you'd inspected this property and parking is one thing, but it also sounds like the condition of the building might be substandard. You can't speak to whether that's
Because I
any of
haven't,
the comparables?
no,
or-
because I haven't inspected the property, but I have used all the tools at my disposal,
Right.
you know, Google Maps, aerial photos. I've looked at all the outsides of the comparable properties. Some of them I have been in. A majority of them I've just sort of used a desktop review of the comparables just to take a look at what the building looks like, because I wasn't gonna choose a comparable that looked significantly better than the subject property. So the comparables I brought forward are all, like I said, you know, those sort of mom and pop vehicle
Sure.
service that aren't, you know, the greatest, like, high quality vehicle service garages like the Mr. Lubes. I tried to keep it in range of what was going on with the
Okay,
subject.
thank you.
Okay, do you know if any of your comparables have limited parking, like the property that we're dealing with today?
I hadn't looked into all of them to see how much parking they have, but I do know one of them, the first comparable, number 1 on Chevrier, they have a very limited parking there, just based on looking at the photos. Comparable number 4 looks like they have limited parking. Comparable number 6 looks like they have limited parking. But the remainder of them look like they have sort of average amount of parking for the vehicle service related.
Okay, and if somebody's operating a garage, or this property in question, if the parking is limited as the applicant has indicated, would you agree that it's possible that the number of tenants who would want to occupy it is also limited?
That is all, that's a consideration,
And that
absolutely.
would also result in possibly a lower rent being charged for it?
Yeah, possibly.
Okay. Thank you. You can you made your presentation last time. I don't know if you have anything else to add to it now. If you do so, you can, but we've heard you before and obviously you can tell by the questions we asked.
It's just as
that we
boring
get
the
it.
second time around. So, yeah, the same issues do apply, and it's, yeah, there's no point in rehashing them unless you want to hear them again. I can
No, we don't have to hear it again. We, as I said, it will apply. Once you said it, we'll consider it moved. You did indicate that you have negotiated an increase in rent, but that's for an oncoming term?
Okay, so, yeah, actually, I'll tell you guys exactly what the situation is to fill up the remainder of the lease. It was $21.85 for the first 6 months of this year. That was the amount per
We're talking
month.
about this year, though.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
and then.
that's fine, we're dealing, well, that's, okay.
That's right.
Yeah, because this is
Yeah.
2018,
Yeah, okay,
right?
yes.
Yeah, and then for the remainder of the year, so from July 1st onwards.
Yes.
The rent is $2368.54, $2,368.54. So the total rent paid, or to be paid for 2018 will be $27,321.24.
And again, you're paying your own utilities.
And we're paying our own utilities, yeah.
Okay,
And there's no plan to put air conditioning or anything like that, it's just a.
that's fine. Yeah, we're doing air conditioner that
Yeah.
uses some electricity, but you say it doesn't work very well.
Yeah, it doesn't work very well. So,
Any questions of the applicant?
I don't have any questions, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, panel members, any questions?
None.
Okay.
No
And I don't
questions.
have any either. I think I already asked you, basically, so.
yeah,
Okay, well, thank you very much. Leave that with us. We'll,
perfect. Thanks you guys for your time, I really appreciate it. Okay, yeah.
yeah, you'll get our,
That's
you'll get,
very nice meeting you.
Just so you know, we may send one of our staff out just to confirm the no
Absolutely.
AC, but that's all we have to do.
Yep, there's not a problem. She's usually there, the office manager's usually there between 8 and 4, so if there's,
Perfect.
they can always.
Thank
phone.
you.
All right, yeah. All right,
you'll receive a letter from the Board of Revision indicating what we decided.
okay,
Okay?
thanks so much.
It'll come to you by register mail.
Okay, that's good.
Are we expecting anybody?
We should be, we have brace for them. But is it okay if I request a recess so I may go to?
You can. We can do a little bit of
Do you affirm the evidence you present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. We're gonna deal with the realty first, so I can do business brief when we get to it.
Okay.
Okay, so it's indicated by our assistant, administrative assistant, we're doing the realty first of all for 2017. Proceed when you're ready, Ms.
Perfect.
Warren.
So we're looking at file number 18-91. The roll number is 03-071-969-000. The address is 1565 Wilson Place. The roll year is 2017 with a reference date of April 1st, 2014. So as stated, we're looking at 1565 Wilson Place. It's located on the northeast corner of Wilson Place and Waverly Street. It's near the outdoor soccer.
Oh, sorry, there was a point I had to address before we started, and I spoke to Mr. Buss already. He was an assessor on this property in 2010. So he's been in the property. I think any matters we had have long since been disposed of, and I don't have any objections to him sitting on the panel. But I just thought that everyone should know.
Okay, well, I think Mr. Buss maybe, do you have anything to respond to that?
No, I'm glad you remember it.
I can tell you all about it. We went down, we inspected it, and it was a municipal board cert we ended up signing after your inspection.
It appears that you've got a better memory of the events than Mr. Buss does.
Yeah.
It's the only thing I rember. Birthdays, anniversaries.
You don't have any objection to Mr. Buss sitting
No,
on?
we spoke in the hallway already, and I just thought I was going through the file, because this was actually part of case management yesterday, and I saw his name on it. That's why I remembered, not because I have a great memory.
Okay, and Mr. Buss has indicated he doesn't think that this is going to influence his decision in any way, anyway. So we'll proceed.
Sorry.
That's
Oh,
fine.
that's okay.
Thanks for pointing that out to them.
So as stated, the roll year is 2017, April 1st, 2014 is our reference date, and I'm recommending to maintain the 2017 assessed value of $8,793,000. This is a supplementary assessment that we had sent out because the basement had been renovated, and so we had to reflect that in our records. So this was an addition of the basement, the newly renovated basement space. So the subject property has 2 stories and a leasable area of 48,795 square feet. I'd like to note that there's 119 parking stalls for the subject property, which works out to about 1 stall per 400 square feet, whereas the bylaw indicates that you require for office buildings a stall for every 750 square feet. If you turn to page 2, you'll see aerial photos of the subject property showing its location as previously described on the corner of Waverly Street and Wilson Place. On page 3, you'll see some subject property photos. On page 4, you'll see the request for information, and on page 4, you'll also see the subject sale history. It sold on January 19th, 2006 for $5,400,000. That was prior to any renovations being done. It also sold on January 18th to the subject owner for $6,600,000. Again, that was prior to any renovations being done. On page 5, you'll see comparables. The top chart of comparables are office comparables located in a relatively close proximity to the subject property. The average is $15.33 and the median is $14.75, and they range from $10 to $22. The subject property has been significantly renovated, and it's a very nice, high-quality property. The bottom are basement comparables that are inferior to the subject property, and they range from $7.50 to $10.96. On page 6, you'll see the income workup for the subject property. We have 16,265 square feet of basement space, and we have 32,530 square feet of upper floor space. That includes the main floor as well. We have a vacancy of 9.5%, expenses of 7%, shortfall of $6.50, and an overall cap rate of 6.75%, for a total value of $8,793,000. On page 7, you'll see the income workup once again. On page 8, you'll see our cap rate information. On page 9, you'll see Municipal Assessment Act information. And on page 10 through 13, you'll see the subject property income and expense mailer for the reference date. And on page 14, you're gonna see the sale questionnaire that was sent out for the sale to the subject owner that they've filled out with respect to the sale. On page 18, you'll see the specific sale questionnaire that the owner had filled out, and they indicated that an appraisal was done on the property for 10
I'm
point.
gonna object right now to this. I'm gonna ask if you exclude that from your presentation. The city doesn't have the right to quote from that document. At a hearing 4 years ago, the city's legal counsel withdrew that information, and because they lacked the copyright approval to quote from it, and it's incredibly out of context and misleading
Okay.
and prejudicial.
Let me ask you a question, Mr. Eva, where did that appraisal emanate from? How did the city get that appraisal?
They
Was it done
asked-
by the city?
They asked the owner for an appraisal as part of their.
So the owner got the appraisal done and paid for that appraisal and submitted to the city, and you're telling me now the city can refer to
No,
this
that-
piece of evidence that was submitted by the applicant to begin with?
The owner submitted one page from it.
Mr. Chairman, if I could clarify?
Yes.
So the city sends out the subject sale mailer that we've looked at, as I indicated, through pages 14, 15, and 16. They look similar to the income and expense mailer. And then we send out pages 18 and 19 that the owner has filled out. So this is a City of Winnipeg form. The owner also sent the letter of transmittal for the appraisal report, not the whole appraisal, just the letter of transmittal. We have not supplied that here today because that is not our appraisal to submit, but we have supplied the forms that we have sent to the owner that the owner has then filled out.
So in
So
answer to
they've-
your questions, they submitted one page, and now the city is assuming that that form is an appraisal, for one. Secondly, it's somebody else's opinion of value. Third, it was under hypothetical conditions. Fourth, there's a lack of copyright. In other words, you need permission from the author to use it.
We don't have a
or
copy.
You need permission from the writer and the owner of the appraisal to rely on it for any
We're
reason
just-
whatsoever.
we're just quoting
And that's
the
stated
answer
in
to
the
the
body
question.
of the appraisal.
I know, we don't have the appraisal here.
Exactly. So,
So
but the
we're-
point is, it's prejudicial, because
But it's the evidence that was submitted by the applicant on a form to the city, and you're saying the city can't rely on this form that they filled out, which I don't know what they used to, for the basis of it, but I don't think that you could, maybe you can claim that the appraisal itself is not something we can rely on, but the document that was submitted by the applicant to the city, certainly the applicant, when he submitted that document, intended the city to rely on it, and they're doing so.
well.
And I don't see how you can
I
indicate that's
think,
sufficient.
I think that the owner wasn't aware of his rights when he submitted it, that he didn't have permission. As it happened, it was done by a colleague of mine who quite strenuously objected to anybody seeing his appraisal, let alone knowing of its presence.
Yeah, we're not
because-
talking about the appraisal itself, because
He
we don't
wasn't-
know,
he
we don't,
wasn't-
we don't know that this document was filled out by the applicant.
But what do you know that the appraisal's about?
We don't,
Could it be insurance replacement costs?
I
Could
know,
it be?
all we're doing is we're saying that the applicant filled out an
Could it be a
application.
marital estate, a divorce, you don't know that. And so for the city to put this information in and to allude that there's some mythical appraisal out there floating around is prejudicial, for one, and it's not appropriate. I mean, why do we have an assessment department? So that they can go and ask people in the street what something is worth
It's worth.
and bring it in?
I take a little bit of offense to all of this that's going on, because all I was just saying was, this is a sales mailer that the owner filled out. I was just going to read what they wrote verbatim, that it's a $10.3 million appraisal subject to renovations on the building, and I was going to move on. I don't think that,
It's nothing you've done. I mean, your lawyer agreed with our lawyer. We were represented by Antoine Hacot of TDS, and your lawyer was long gone. It was,
Mr. Muth, I agree that maybe the
he
appraisal itself.
agreed that that reference should not be in there.
Well, I can see the appraisal not being there, but if the applicant
It
filled out a
could-
document, which they intended the city to rely upon.
He took
and-
the scissors in front of us and cut it out
Mr.
before the
Chairman.
board saw it.
Okay, well, anyway, we heard this already, so, I can say it's not gonna, even if we decide to disregard it, we've heard it.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah, so, at this point.
I'm aware of the Canadian Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, and when I saw the letter of transmittal attached to this sales mailer, I knew that I can't include that because people, as Mr. Neufeld states, those are copyrighted, and the owner did submit it to us, but I was not going to submit that as evidence because that is not ours to submit. But what is ours to submit is this form and the answers that the owner has filled out on
It's
it.
part of the same,
Okay, well, you know what, I think I've indicated that, but I think that if we've reached a situation where we have two choices right now. Number one, you withdraw your objection, or number two, you withdraw the document, or number three, I meet with my fellow board members and decide whether it should be evidence before us or not.
Okay.
Okay?
I.
So if you want to clear the,
I definitely cannot
Okay.
withdraw the objection.
I hear that.
It's a very detailed liability issue.
okay.
Not
Mr.
just-
Mr.
it's not
Newell,
just
we
the
heard you,
text. Okay.
obviously, and
All
we
right.
will consider it now.
Okay.
Okay, so let's just have a bit of a recess.
Okay.
You can leave, and our board members will consult. Okay, to indicate that we've conferred, and the position that the board is taking is that the appraisal itself very well might be something that is privileged and not before us, but a document that is prepared by the applicant and given to the city for it to rely upon, and before us today is something that we can rely upon, is not the appraisal. The appraisal might have been the basis for them to arrive at that, but that's not what we're relying on. We're relying on the document itself, and that document is before us, and we're going to rely on that document. Thank you.
So as stated, when the owner filled out this form, they just indicated that there was an appraisal done. They indicated that the appraised value was $10.3 million, subject to the pending renovations that were needing to be done. They indicate at the bottom of the form also that significant renovations in the amount of $4.2 million were intended to be done on the property before taking occupancy. On page 20, you'll see some inspection photos from January 28th, 2016. These are the main and upper floors. So you'll see there's front reception, the boardroom on page 21, main office area on 22, 23 is more photos, 24, 25, 26, and then on 27 you'll see the basement area. This is the basement area prior to the renovations that have been done for us doing the supplementary assessment. And then on page 28, these are the inspections from March 2016 of the basement once the renovations had been done. So you'll notice that the basement space is renovated very, very similar to the upper floor areas. We have more photos on 29. You'll note there's large windows in the basement. It is very nice basement space when you're comparing it to other basement space. Page 30, again, these are more basement photos. They obviously have a gym for the staff, a lunchroom for the staff, typical staff area that they have created, which flows very nicely with the interior finishes of the rest of the building. On page 32, I've just included all of the permits to date since the sale with a total declared permit value of $6,217,200. And then I've included the permits for everyone to see, just to get an idea of what they've done. So they have landlord improvements, they've done interior alterations to level 200, we've got some sign permits in here. Number of interior alteration permits, structural alteration permits. They have some exterior work that they've been doing. So a number of these permits have shown that the owner who took possession has done significant renovations to this property to bring it up to a high quality finish. That's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Neufeld, any questions?
Yes. I noticed that in the permits that you included several that go well past the reference date. What would be the reason for that?
I'm just trying to show, because we're trying to show the physical aspects of the building, to show what type of physical condition the building is currently in.
Do you know any of the background behind these permits? Have you investigated the scope of work other than what's?
I went through all the permits.
Other than what's listed on the permit?
Other than what's written on the permit, I went through the plans of the permits, and so anyone that had a significant amount of value with respect to your interior alterations and such, I looked at all the submitted plans, because when someone submits a permit to the city, they submit electrical plans, they submit mechanical plans, architectural plans, they submit things that were done. So a wide variety of things were done.
And did you look through the cost breakdown?
They don't submit the cost breakdown.
And it has been submitted to your office, has it not? You do have my submission from 2 years ago. And I can give you a copy of what I submitted.
I haven't
It
looked.
resembles this.
No, I have not seen that cost breakdown, no.
You have not had an opportunity to determine which areas, where the money was spent, did you?
All we're trying to show is that significant renovations had been done, monies had been spent in different
But
areas.
the question was, you don't know where, you haven't got it detailed as to where the particular money was allocated, do you?
We don't know.
Okay, and you stated that there were significant renovations to bring it up to superior, to a higher quality, and then it's superior. Now, have you inspected this property?
I haven't, but I have looked at the property and spoken to the assessors who have inspected
And
the property.
did you inspect the property before this work was done?
I have not.
Now, this property is what we would call a bi-level, correct?
I have not inspected the property.
The lower level is a step down, and the first floor is a step up.
Again, I have not
You weren't
inspected
aware
the
of that?
property, so I can't speak to
Now,
that.
did these renovations change that nature of the building?
Again, I
The
haven't.
structural, did they change the structural?
I haven't inspected the property, Mr. Neufeld. All I have are the photos that I've relied upon and the assessors who have inspected the property to get an idea of what quality finish it is. And when I speak to the fact that they've made it superior, I'm speaking in with respect to the comparables that I brought forward. There's a number of comparables that are significantly older to the subject that don't have as high quality finish and newer space.
Now,
That's all I'm saying.
getting to that, your comparables, do you have a method to grade your comparables and compare them to the subject?
I've looked through my comparables and I've looked at, photos of them. Some of them I've even been inside. So I have taken a look
These
and
are
I've shown
on
a range of
page-
comparables.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt that. I don't have the page in front of me.
Page 5.
Okay. So you haven't looked at any of these, so my question was, do you have a grading system? Do you, for example, downtown, you have class A, B, C. Do you do the same for suburban?
For suburban, I have looked at, like I said, I've looked at all the properties, I've looked at the ages of them, I've looked at the exterior, some of them I have been inside, and like I said, I have photos of the property. Some assessors in our building have been in some of these comparables, and I've just asked them their opinion on the finishes to get an idea of where we're at.
So
So
it's
I have looked at
But
it.
it's not codified then,
There's no code that
Okay.
I've created,
Now,
no.
comparable number 3, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that Stuart Olson who built the building and leased it to themselves?
It is Stuart Olson, and I'm not sure if they built the building and leased it to themselves. Based on the information we have, it's a net rent.
Okay, so if you were told that they actually did lease it to themselves and then they were offering it up for sublet in further future years, you'd say that's possibly true?
I don't know if they've leased it to themselves. This is something that you're saying to me here today,
Okay.
so I have not had any way of verifying any of that information. Based on the information that has been presented to our department, we have been told that that's a net rent.
with regard to the capitalization, sorry, let's just back this up right to the root of our issue. How is this property being assessed? Is it the income method?
Yes.
You've listed a capitalization rate on page 6, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Now, where's your backup information for this rate? Is it just page 8?
Yes.
Now, on page 8, you have, these are the parameters, obviously, and this is suburban classification.
Yes.
And in this classification, and I'm looking at the third and the fourth rows,
Okay.
the city does not differentiate between suburban A and B, I take it, is that correct?
Yes, we don't separate out our suburban offices.
And the other people who are quoted in here do make the separation, do they not?
Correct.
Okay. For example, the Colliers shows a 0.75% difference, and the CBRE shows a 0.5% difference, correct?
Correct.
And these people are in the business of marketing, leasing, selling buildings, correct?
Correct.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Buss, any questions for the assessor?
I see from the permit list that most of the big amount permits were done after the sale in 2013.
Yes, that's what I had stated, that the sale took place similar to the sales mailer that was submitted, saying that they bought it for $6.6 million and that they intended to put $4.2 million worth of renovations into it subsequent to the sale. So, as I stated, they've done a number of renovations to increase the physical characteristics of the building and improve it since taking possession of it.
That's all my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I have no further questions.
And I don't either. Mr. Newfeld?
Thank you. Now, Mr. Chairman, as you noted, I objected to
Right.
certain information, so I'm going to ask you for a little more latitude than normal in my rebuttal.
Oh, you're doing a rebuttal at this point? Okay,
Yes.
that's fine.
Just because the information shouldn't have been in there, and since the decision was you're allowing it, I'm going to have to address it. Just as a preamble, I thought that that we were doing things on the income approach and
Well, I can tell you that the income approach is good. Go ahead.
right, but I find that when someone brings forward a sale, that the responsibility, and I'm not talking about an individual assessor, the responsibility of anyone relying on it is to know something about it and look at the influences. There's a reason why our system went to the income approach. And Mr. Buss was around when that all happened. There's a reason it went there, because chasing the sale is a dangerous thing for an assessor to do.
Mr. Chairman, I object to the statement of the city chasing the sale. I stated very clearly in my presentation, we've relied on the income approach. We're nowhere near the appraised value. We are using the sale as just information for the board.
Look, we're at your page 6, okay? And I know that the other things I think you use to try to defend your work on page 6.
Yes,
The page 6 is your work.
absolutely.
And that's what we look at too. But,
Absolutely.
Okay, so the other matters are peripheral.
I'm just looking for a little more
No,
latitude, and
but
I'm gonna.
I'm gonna give you that latitude there because I
Thank you.
gave the,
Right.
okay, so go ahead.
Yeah, so this is a letter that was done by Brian Talio, who is a partner. Well, actually, we were sold a few months ago. He used to be a partner in Colliers, Pratt & McGarry. Now he's just a simple vice president. He was involved in the transaction along with Chris Cleverly. And you can read the details of this. The bottom line was that Payworks, the owner-occupant, needed space and needed space fast. They got a big contract, and as much as we deliberate value of real estate, in the real world, businesses don't, this type of business looks at real estate is probably third in their priority. Getting the contract means more. So you can see that the pressures on them to find a space, meet their contract, were far outweighed. And then, of course, the vendor, we had a vendor who wasn't listed. So this fails to meet arm's length, fails to meet, definition of market value under undue pressure.
Okay, the fact of the matter is that page 6 is what we, works what we're relying on. The other things are periphery, as is this.
Correct.
They're both periphery. And,
It's-
you know,
No, but, you know, I just want to be, if someone's gonna bring it up, there is an obligation to investigate it.
I give you latitude, we have this before us.
Okay.
Typically, in a court, this not be allowed because it's hearsay evidence, but for what it's worth, we'll accept it the same way we'll accept any of the other evidence.
That's
Okay?
fine. Now, the assessor also mentioned about spending money to upgrade it to a superior quality. Now, I had submitted this information in a past hearing and gave it to the city. We're actually having it reviewed by a contractor and an engineer. But of the 3.5 million, approximately 2.7 million of that was spent on repairs, data cabling, and code upgrades. So this is a business that uses an extensive amount of data, and when you make a new installation with all the data stations, it has to come in fresh and new. You cannot reuse existing data cabling. But you know what Hydro had in there was archaic anyway. They had a ton of Cat 3 wiring, and I don't know if you know what that term means, but it's outdated. So they had to put in Cat 5, 5 Plus, and 6 data cabling in order to get their Nordex certification for data cabling. I did this work for Ipsos Reid for several years, and you know, any contract we did on renovating a building was 90% data cabling. That's how expensive it is. Now, the actual cost of the data cabling was about $826,000. Now, with data cabling, because you introduced extra terminals, you have to put in more electrical distribution. You don't draw more power, but you need more distribution, which means you need new panels. You also need what's called TVSS, transit voltage surge suppressors, and other things that the data cabling people required. This is all going to the business end of it. This is not saleable. You know, if somebody else took over this building and said, look, we've got all this lovely data cabling, they'd say, so what? We've got to redo it.
Well, depending on what kind of business they're in.
No.
I mean, it could, no. it
You
could be-
won't, no, you won't get Nordic certification. And that's what, it's a very frustrating part for me working for Ipsos Reid, where Nordex, who sell this, said, yeah, we'll guarantee, only if you redo your cabling. That's the nature of this business. So you cannot reuse it. And it is not real estate, it's all related to business. Now with that, you need the new server room. Now we're going into the code issue. Now the new server room, you need the cooling for the server room, and now you also need fire suppression for server rooms with delay systems on it. They put delay systems on so that if the sprinklers go, you have a bit of time so you can back up your data before it gets flooded. Thousands of dollars on this. When a permit was issued, PP&D also made them do code upgrades. The rear stairwell had to be rebuilt with structural steel. We have the line item in here for structural steel. It was $110,000 just for the metal to rebuild a stairwell to meet code. The elevator wasn't wide enough and had to be widened. That was in the list. That was for barrier-free access. And remember, we are in a bi-level. Every floor requires barrier-free access with new code. So this is what led the cost up. Now, cosmetically, I can tell you what they spent. They replaced 5 windows. They put in new carpet squares, put in glass partitions, and they painted the outside of the building. Went to an open concept. Demolition and open concept. Our contractor's putting that number somewhere around $700,000 to $800,000, which is $16 a square foot. $16 a square foot. Now, you know, I'm from Colliers. We manage several million square feet of office property. We turn over a tenant, we spend more than that on painting and redecorating. We spend $20 easily just for a fresh coat of paint and to repair when we put in a new tenant. There has been no major quality upgrade. The reason why? Why did this building stink? Why is it so rotten? It's a bi-level. Nobody wants a bi-level. It can't be demised. It's got a stairwell up front that you go to the different floors. That's why that Hydro was a single tenant. They had to find another single tenant. And then we had an owner who had a business situation that he had to do. Now, since that time, all the other deficiencies of the building have been coming forward. Now, they ran out of, they didn't have the money to finish the basement, and you know, they didn't need it at the time. Business grew, and then now they finished off the basement, like, and this is why we're here today. Today, they're working on the outside of the building. Last year, they discovered that there was no thermal break on the envelope. So the paint was peeling. That ugly orange and brown paint they put on it was peeling off within a few weeks of it being installed because there was no thermal break. And a thermal break is so that the outside and the inside ambient temperature don't match, and it just leads to moisture problems inside and outside. So today, that's what they're doing, installing a thermal break. None of this is going to let them ever get more money for rent. It just means that they can go onto the market and get the market rent. Now, I have some more rebuttal information. And I had asked the assessor about how do you grade buildings? You have a system. We saw in the assessor's evidence that the Colliers and the CBRE companies have grading systems for suburban. What I'm giving you now are excerpts from the Johnson report, which used to be the Crouch report. These date from 2005 to 2018. And this is the industry standard for classification. And you'll notice that
Mr. Chairman,
Yes?
a lot of this information looks like new evidence with respect to leases and things like that. I'm not sure.
They don't care about the leases, it's all about the grading. I asked the question about grading.
Okay, so, just to get this clear, so you have everything suburban,
Yep.
okay?
And then there's A, B, and C. And you'll note
Okay.
Suburban C, 1565 Wilson, and this dates from 2005 to 2018, through our period. The industry has never recognized this as being other than a Class C building. And, you know, the reason is it's still a bi-level. It doesn't matter what anyone says, there's no grade level access.
Okay, this report is dated 2005?
The first page.
Yes?
The next page is the 2006 report. Next is 2008, then 12 and 13, 14, 16, and 18. Just to show you that through 12 years, there's never been a classification change. This takes us through the period where the assessor, the assessment department stated that the building has had significant renovations to bring it up to a higher quality. That's why it's rebuttal. The industry does not agree with it because the major portions of it.
Okay,
really
I think
relate to
I have a
market.
difficulty, and you know what the difficulty is? I want to make you clear that,
Okay.
so that you can respond to it. The difficulty I have is that we don't know what the Johnson report does when they compile the report. We don't know if they've gone and revisited that building. So I have a difficulty knowing whether the updates, very likely, it might have been a Class C building, and with all the upgrading, it might not be a Class C building anymore.
Well, you just heard evidence that the assessor made it, they haven't visited the building.
No, I'm talking about the Johnson report. I don't know what they've done.
Well,
We saw photographs. and-
I've visited the building numerous times in there, I concur with this report. Mr. Talio concurs with this report, he's visited the building several times. and
Mr. Tally's not giving evidence here. That letter was one thing, but
I'm giving evidence, and, you know, you heard the assessor state that she talked to her colleagues. Was that good enough? Well, I've talked to my colleagues.
yeah,
And who's the burden of proof on it? Not me, the assessment department.
fair enough.
Now, Mr. Johnson, who I know quite well, does a very exhaustive study, and he does pound the pavement and look at his buildings. And if you look at the other classes in here. For example, one of the comparables that the assessor has used is 1345 Waverly, which is a superior building, is a B. It's a superior class building. So it will get greater rents. 895 Waverly was not listed in here because, oh, sorry, I never even got into that discussion on 895. That was no, okay, sorry. I'm thinking of a different building, never mind.
Can you show me an instance, Mr. Neufeld, on this report from 2005 to 2018, where a building is classified differently in 2012 than it was in 2018 than it was in 2005?
No, because you don't change building classifications, because unless you change the structure. Well, I wasn't joking when I asked the assessor.
Okay, so you're saying that it doesn't matter if somebody spent $6 million on a
No.
property and upgrading it, it's still gonna be a
On-
Class C building?
On this building, yes, because you know what you need to do to change the class? You need to raise it up to 8 feet to get the first floor to be grade level. Then you need to fix the front entirely to turn it so that it's demisable. That's not demisable now. That's what realtors look at. That's how people in the business look at it. We don't just say it's a building and to spend money in data cabling, it's worth more.
Okay.
Now, incidentally, in our basement comparables, 1479 Buffalo, you'll notice, would be, I think there's a classification on suburban miscellaneous that's actually inferior. I didn't put that classification in because it was on the next page. But we take no objections with those rents. I think what we take objection to are the rents on page 5 and coming out of the wrong class. Now, 1558 Wilson, which is the assessor's comparable number 2, we take no objection with. That's across the street, and that was another. That was originally an industrial building that was converted to office, and we manage both those properties, and they're very, very comparable. So that belongs in the classifications. As I mentioned, 50 Fultz is owner occupied, doesn't belong. 1345 Taylor is I believe that's Shindico's office, and that goes in. Just see if he's brought that into the inventory.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure what all of this has to do with the rebuttal that's been presented. As
Whether it's rebuttal or it's evidence, I mean, it's something that I think that the applicant has got an opportunity and a right to refer to.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I would just think that that would happen in his presentation with his information.
No, because I'm addressing your comparables.
Well, actually, I think you're mixing everything up. We're gonna, you know what, I don't care how you present it.
Right.
If it's rebuttal or evidence, it's the same thing. So if this is part of your argument, which is.
Okay. I was just, here's my point. I mean, 1345 Waverly is listed as a comparable, it's the higher end of the scale, and it's a superior building. The market says so. 50 Fultz is at the higher end of the accessory scale, it's an owner-occupied rent. The rest of the rents presented here are fairly, are worth looking at, because we are dealing with a range of rents, and as with all ranges of rents, there's highs and lows. I just find that the higher end have been included, should not have been included in this analysis, and as a result, it would have brought down their median. That's what I wanted to say about this. Now, just a procedural question. I know we have 2018 coming up. Do I need to supply a second set of information for the file?
Any information you give us, you can simply say later that you'd like to.
Got it.
Yeah, I won't go over it again. I just want to know from the secretary
Oh.
if she needs an extra copy for the file.
Okay, that's fine.
So that's what I wanted to address now. If you would like me to continue on with my presentation, or do you want?
I think just if you consider that was rebuttal, I think we should give the opportunity to the assessor to ask questions on your rebuttal if she has any.
I'd appreciate that because there was a lot
There
there.
was a lot, and I think it'd be easier for the panel members as well.
Okay.
Okay, so any questions on the rebuttal that has just been provided in this order?
So we're gonna, I think, start backwards, just because it's fresh in our minds. And Mr. Chairman, I think you made a good point with respect to the Johnson report. We're not quite sure how Mr. Johnson puts his information together. Mr. Neufeld, are you familiar with how Mr. Johnson puts his information together? Is there definitions in the Johnson
Yes.
report of what is an A, B, a C?
There are.
Um,
The report was started by Mr. Croach, and.
Oh, Mike, what, you said yes,
No,
there are definitions, that's all.
He started the definitions, and I worked with Mr. Croach for 5 years, and we were an integral part of.
Are the definitions in the Johnson report?
They're in the body of the report, yes.
Okay. Now, you indicated on, when you spoke to the cap rates on my page 8, that the industry standard of Colliers, CBRE, classify things as suburban A and B. So if the Johnson report is very accurate and these suburban Cs exist and suburban government and suburban medical, is there a reason why Colliers doesn't put that information together when they're
Yeah,
analyzing properties?
We don't care, we don't treat C and lesser as of interest to our clients. The report that the city is using, and it's kind of been used out of context, is it's a sales tool, first of all. Secondly, it's based on investors. Investors aren't.
I think you've answered my question.
No, I haven't. Investors aren't interested in C and miscellaneous, they're interested in A and B. That's why we don't track them.
Are you relying on the rents that are placed in this Johnson report or just the
No,
classification?
these are asking rents.
My next question relates to the fact that you stated in your presentation of rebuttal that they renovated the basement because they needed the space for the staff. But you gave this letter that indicates that Payworks was only in, they had outgrown their 15,000 square foot space and required 30,000 square feet of suburban office space. Where did I read that? Okay, so you'll have to just give me, oh yes, it says, after an exhaustive search, the property that best fit their needs was 1565 Wilson, although it was too large for their current requirement. So why would they spend a lot of money to renovate the basement for staff if the building was already too large?
We'll have to look at the dates. They bought the building in 12 and did their work in 13 and 14 for the needs of the time.
Okay.
Let the basement stay. Been down there several times, and it was just garbage storage down for years. And then they got another contract and grew into it.
Okay, and then it also stated that this is an off-market approach and that it shouldn't be considered an arm's length transaction, where on the sales mailer on page 18, the owner indicated on question 3, was this sale an arm's length open market transaction? And they indicated yes. Can you explain the difference?
Yes, they're two vastly different terms. Now, the vendor was Hopewell Development Corporation based in Calgary. The purchaser was Payworks. They are not related. So we do have an arm's length relationship. But Hopewell had listed the property to lease. That's their business. They wanted to develop it and lease it. And they weren't really interested in selling it. They had to be convinced with a bit more money. And Payworks were willing to pay because they had a pending contract, and this is the only property of that size that fit their 30,000 feet requirement that was on the market. There was one additional prospect was 1100 Waverly, which was the industrial park that Hydro vacated, but it was composed of 6,000 and 9,000 square foot bays, and the only one that was really would work out good for them was taken by Tower Engineering. So that was out of the question. The rest were back.
I don't mean to interrupt you, Mr. Neufeld, but you've presented a lot of information and I'm trying to keep things concise. And I just asked a question as to how a letter from your colleague is indicating that it was off market and the owner, when they filled out the sales mailer, was open market.
You gotta understand that when we do these valuations and we represent people, we don't just have a very superficial look. These are our clients. These are our clients for a realty brokerage. They were our client on the property management end. we're very involved with them, and we have more knowledge. Now, Mr. Dirksen, who filled in this form, is an accountant who works for Payworks. He's not familiar with the terms that are used. If you had asked him something about GAAP or capital gains or something to that effect, he would have given you a very knowledgeable answer. He's not knowledgeable about these terms. His company was under undue pressure as the determination of market value, one of the points, can be no undue pressure. We did not have a willing seller. Remember, you need a willing seller, willing buyer. It wasn't listed for sale. So you've lost the market value definition.
Okay, well, my next question then, you talk about willing buyers and willing sellers and under undue pressure. The sale dated on January 19th, 2006 for $5,400,000. We, to our knowledge, have notes in our system that you accepted the value in.
Well, we're getting in trouble here. Now, Mr. Buss was involved in that, so if you're gonna ask questions.
I'm just asking questions about the sale.
I'm just bringing out a.
Okay, I'll rephrase that. Mr. Neufeld, have you ever stated that the previous sale at $5,400,000 was a good sale? It's a yes or no question.
No, it's
Mr.
not.
Neufeld.
No, it's not. The previous sale was,
Mr. Neufeld, I just asked if you had ever said if it was a
You know,
good sale or
ask-
not. You
ask
just
the
have to
question,
say
yes
yes
or
or
no.
no.
no, it can't, because it's not a yes or no question.
Answer it as concisely as you can, please.
Okay, when the building came to the market, Hydro had announced that they're building the downtown tower, and as part of that, they needed to get out of their leases, get out of their properties, so they negotiated a sale and a handsome lease cancellation clause with the new owner in order to get out of the lease. So the money was fair and open, but it was far exceeded the market value.
All right, my next question is with respect to the cost that you were speaking of. You indicated of the permits that were taken out, $800,000 was with respect to the data cabling, and then you said about $800,000 was with respect to all the rest of them. So I'm not sure how that equates to the $4+ million that has been spent on the property. Are there
$3.5
some-
million. Turns out that the permit number was, it was actually $3,489,000.
So, okay, my question then is, 800,000 and 800,000 is 1.6 million, where is the remainder
Certainly.
3.5?
I'll give you some of the highlights of this. Demolition, $67,000. Hazmat removal, $60,000. There was asbestos in it. Removal of ductwork, $27,000. Concrete patching, $20,000. The structural steel stairs, the materials alone, $110,000.
But didn't you indicate that all of those costs were part of the 800,000?
No, these were over and above. The electrical data
Okay.
cabling was $826,856.
So there were more there was more things
Then,
done involved to,
The mechanical, which is bringing in the fresh air and doing the server rooms, and which is a code upgrade issue, $670,225. New fire suppression system, $19,000. One elevator, $19,000. And I mentioned that the upgrades, the carpet that was installed was $153,945. But as part of that, they had the levels and floors, which is repair, not upgrades, $18,000. The windows, I told you, there were a handful done, $65,285. And I told you that there was glass partitions, $84,795. Then there was general contracting terms, which is a percentage of all of the costs distributed by category, and that was about $400,000, but that was split in all the categories, so a piece here, a piece there.
okay, so.
There were revisions later, and.
I think you've answered my question, Mr. Neufeld.
CCTV, $24,000.
The question's been answered.
Okay, I'm just saying, we did supply this information.
I appreciate that, but
I give it to you
again,
again, I don't have 6 copies, but if board wants to make copies, I'll give it again.
No, we don't need that. The fact of the matter is that we are basically working on income approach, and so all this is really.
That's my point
peripheral.
too.
Anyway,
I find that the,
well, you brought it up too, and so.
no, I wasn't going to.
No, you did bring
I
it
wasn't
up,
going
so
to
we're
until
obviously I'm
the-
allowing,
Yes.
questions on what you indicated, but as I said, we are looking at the income approach, so this is all peripheral anyway.
And again, we were just bringing up the information to show
Okay.
the physical characteristics currently of the building, similar to a
Which
house.
is fine,
When you
and
supply.
we've got that.
Yeah,
Thank
and when
you.
you do renovations on a home, the market typically
Any
will
other
pay a
questions?
higher value for it. My last question
Okay.
is with respect to, Mr. Neufeld made a statement with respect to his contractor indicated that only about $16 a square foot were done on interior renovations, and that typically, because his company is a major leasing company, that when a new tenant goes into a space, to even put up a coat of paint is $20 a square foot. Mr. Neufeld, based on the pictures that I've seen, would they have painted this property and put on a new coat of paint?
Oh, no, they didn't need paint because they didn't, except for the interior hallways. The comment was that any time to turn over a space, a professional landlord's got to spruce the place up. And it doesn't make it give you more rental income, it gives you the ability to rent it quicker. A major upgrade.
I was just asking if there was a new
Yeah,
coat of
okay,
paint.
no, and I didn't.
Answered. Question's been answered. Any other questions?
My last question is with respect
That's just about
to,
your last question. It was your last question.
I've got more than.
Okay.
Mr. Neufeld provides a lot of information, and I think.
And
we
just
need
let me
to-
finish your last question if you could ask more.
Okay,
Okay.
there could be more questions.
Okay, go ahead.
With lengthy answers, more things come up. Mr. Neufeld referred to my comparable at 1345 Waverly. Mr. Neufeld, what building is 1345 Waverly? Do you know where it's located?
Oh, I know it well, yes.
Okay.
It's corner of Waverly and McGilvery.
Okay, and what building is that?
I don't think it's got a name. Safeway used to have their local head
Yeah,
office
they're
in
there.
there. Investors Group have an
Yeah.
office in there.
And you would think that that's a superior quality building to the subject?
Absolutely. I've inspected it, represented it on arbitration cases. We know it to be far superior. It's, for example, you walk in the front door and it's not my level.
I just asked if you thought it was superior, and I think
Okay.
you've answered my question.
All right, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I think those are all my questions.
Okay, Ms. McFadden, any questions based on just the rebuttal?
I don't think I have any questions.
Mr. Buss, do you have any questions of Mr. Neufeld?
No, I think they've all been asked.
Okay, I have one question that hasn't been asked, and I think it's an important one. Okay, I'm looking at your Johnson report,
Yeah,
and I'm looking how it classifies suburban property A, B, and C.
yes.
And I'm looking at for the 2016, because that's the closest to the rent for 2017, that we're dealing, or the, I'm sorry, it's the closest to 2017, which you're dealing with right now.
Right, okay,
And I'm looking at the rents charged for the various buildings,
right.
and I note that it doesn't seem to matter if it's classed as an A, B, or C building, as far as the rents are concerned, because the rents are all over the place here.
These are asking rates.
Well,
And they were asking $14 for it prior to the sale, and Mr. Johnson never took this out.
no, but I'm just looking at, though, the asking rates, it doesn't matter then. It says
No.
net, it doesn't say asking rent, it says net rent.
No,
Okay,
this-
which
but
appears
this-
to, net rent means more than, okay, you're saying it's just an asking, okay, then I'll give you that. But the question then is, the net rents appear to be this, doesn't really matter if it's an A, B, or C building, as far as the net rents that are asked for.
We went through this prior to submitting it, and the worry about doing this is when you put in an asking table, the answer becomes lengthy and lengthy.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is, though, that we're dealing with, we're dealing with what the property would generate,
Right.
okay, as a business, to determine the assessment. And I think the most relevant part of this document you've given us is that really, it doesn't really matter if it's an A, B, or C, so I don't really care what it's classified
No,
as.
that's incorrect. I can actually answer that with something a little more concrete. One sec. You'll note that one of the assessor's comparables is 1345 Waverly.
Right.
And they have a 13 and a 14 lease. So if you go and take a look at, go through the 1345 Waverly's askings in this list, and let me just see where one is listed here. Okay, on the 16 report, 1345 Waverly shows an asking of $18. And on the achieved one that the assessors brought forward, we have two rents, one at $16.50 and one at $22. So, on an 18 ask, that's what they were able to achieve. Now, the $16.50, I'm somewhat sure was negotiated downwards, and the 22 was upwards because TIs were included to help the tenant develop his space and amortize into the rent. Now, that's an 18, and our subject was, in the class, and our subject classification ranged in that particular year from 12 to 15. Whereas in the Bs, the askings ranged from 14 to 20, the achieved hit 22. So, the purpose of this report, this section of the report, is a vacancy study, and in it they show that this is what the askings are. Now, with every deal, there's going to be modifications. Like, I happen to know several of these agents who they will on their listings will put a high number, settle for less, or like I said, you amortize your TIs into it, and that's just what happens. We wouldn't rely on this for rental rates. What we will rely on it for is a classification system. There has to be something. We can't go and compare A's to C's.
Okay, I agree with that.
And
The fact
that's what I'm trying to show
But the
you.
fact of the matter is, though, that the only thing we're concerned about is what kind of rent is gonna be achieved by the B or the C.
Right.
And I don't think what you gave us is clarified that.
Well, let's start with the basis that they shouldn't even be compared. Would you, if you were doing a valuation of 180 King across the street, use the rents, or even compare it to 201 Portage? I'm just picking two easy buildings here. No, of course not. Because people would say that's a C or a D and 201's an A. So why do we accept it as a suburban class? That's my point. You can't do that. You've got to stick in your class.
If I'm looking at your, and I'm looking at the front page of it for 2005, but I'm sure it's consistent
Yeah.
throughout. And if I'm a business person who's looking to buy a property, and I'm looking at your number 5 Donald Street, which is a Class A property, that's gonna achieve $9 a square foot, and I look at a C property that is gonna achieve $12 a square foot, I think I'd wanna pay more for the C property than I would for the A property.
Okay, well, I'll answer those things specifically. 5 Donald, if you look at it, was a 442 square foot site. Now, the building's actually got a strata title on it, and it's a rather confusing building, and parking's tough. They haven't been getting good.
Okay, that's what I'm
numbers on
saying
it.
though, this report doesn't really help us a lot because the properties vary,
Yeah, but
and you can have an A that is.
442
That
bucks
is-
square feet. Now, take a look at the next two listed, which are 1661 Portage and 1780 Wellington, each at $12. Those are more of the market of a Class A Winnipeg. Basically, those are the two Class A Winnipeg buildings. And they're 12 and 12 even. And then you look at the other ones, and these are askings, and you're cherry picking. You're looking at the $12 rent for 530 Kenniston. Well, 530 Kenniston is the retail. That's where the first floor is the restaurant, and then the upper levels are office. So it's a retail shopping center.
Okay. We'll proceed with your main argument. please.
I mean, look at the range, 750 to 12
I
versus
have
9
a
to 12.
redirect based on the line of questioning in the Johnson report. If that's
Go ahead.
permittable.
Go ahead. But I'm gonna give, I told you no, but I'm gonna give the same leeway to Mr. Lethal if it should occur later on.
So this is just based on the questioning and answering that took place with respect to the asking rents and things like that. How long was Hydro in 1565 Wilson before they left? Like when did they start their tenancy?
They built it and they vacated,
So they were the ones that built the building?
yeah, or contracted to have it built.
So Hydro had been in there for a very long time?
Yeah.
So on the 2012 Johnson report, page 60, that is shown, it has an asking rent of $14 and a vacancy of 48,900 square feet. Why would they have an asking rent if they had a tenant, but why would they be leasing the
Because,
property?
because they're trying to fill the space.
In 2012?
Yeah, the termination agreement with Hydro took place in, I'm gonna say late 10 or early 11. And under the termination agreement, they were gonna stay another year and a half, I believe it was, and then there was a very large cash outlay to get them out of it.
Okay,
And so the owner puts it on the market.
Okay.
That's just business, good business.
and then, Mr. Chairman, there's been a lot of discussion of 1345 Waverly with respect to the subject. I actually have a picture of 1345 Waverly that I'm happy to either have the secretary take a photocopy of for the panel, or I can walk around and show Mr. Neufeld first as well as the panel, just to give you an idea of what 1345 Waverly actually looks like, if we're talking about what is a C and what is a B, because in my opinion, when I'm looking at these
Okay,
buildings,
provide-
they're very similar.
File a photograph.
Did you want me to make copies?
Are there copies?
I don't, it's just my personal copy because I make pictures of my comparables, so I have an idea of what the buildings look like, so I have an idea of what's
Okay, What
comparable.
we'll do is, you know what, we'll make photographs of it at the next break we have
Okay,
and file it in.
okay. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Neufeld, you can proceed with your main argument.
Okay. Where did I put it? Oh, there we go. Page one is our valuation breakdown, and just to get to the issues, this covers the main issues. We're looking for a rent of $12.50 in the whole building. We had thought about having a lower rate for the basement, but I made the decision that this building is not physically possible to lease in our market in its current physical condition as a demised property. Like, for example, 1345 Waverly, every floor is demised and accessible by elevator. And you come in a main entrance lobby, and that's how it's set out. This building, the problem's right from the beginning, because it was built for one user, that it is a single user building, and it's a bi-level. There's no grade level entry. So, we're calling all the space the same. So if anybody else, the assessor or the board, wants to attribute a lower value to the basement and a higher value to the upper, that's your business. But in the marketplace, it's a single tenant building. Now, because it's a single tenant building, of course, you have other issues to be concerned about, such as vacancy. The building's never been demised for tenants. So unlike several of the other examples, it's a question of the risk mitigation. If you lose one tenant, you're still earning income from another two tenants, and your costs are met. In this case, it's an all or nothing proposition, so it is a riskier proposition. You'll note that we used a different vacancy rate than the assessment department. We were looking at a lower vacancy, but a higher capitalization, and that accounts for that risk factor of what happens when you lose a tenant. It's full, but the risk is if you do go dark, the whole building goes dark, so that's a capitalization rate issue. It was built in 1977, and as the costs, as I've gone through, the costs indicate, it's not, I don't want to use the word upgrade. In order to put it back onto the market and lease it legally, code, a lot more money has to be spent on this building. Now take, for example, 1345 Waverly, why I'm so familiar with it, doing an arbitration, it was newer construction. The owner is an engineer, he built it, he met the code, he'll meet future code, he's got a ton of fresh air, he doesn't have to upgrade the fresh air every time you turn over a tenant. This building didn't have those, it had those capabilities. It was built on an earlier code. Now, 2012, the city required any time you took out a permit, all code upgrades had to be done. To make it clear what you would have to do is, I like this room as a great example. This is a building that was built in the 60s. And in order for them to use this building for a meeting room, they had to upgrade the air. That cost money. You can't just walk into a building and you can't get that money out of your tenant because you're competing against the building that's already got it. You've got to pay for it and take it out of your bottom end. And that's what we talk about in the code upgrades and all the problems they had. They had never budgeted for them, and until they got their contractor's quote, didn't realize how extensive it was, how much of a problem they got into. That was essentially why they halted and didn't develop the lower level, the basement, because it was a cash flow issue. They just were not prepared to spend this much. It would cost them far more than they thought. On page 2 is the overhead view, and the bottom of page 2 is the current work going on in the building. This is a building deficiency. This is not an upgrade. There is a lack of a thermal break. And a thermal break is a non-heat or cooling conductive envelope system so that the cold air doesn't make the inside cold. Like, think of a single piece window, aluminum window pane. If the outside pane is 40 below in the winter, it transmits to the inside and vice versa. So now you need thermal breaks everywhere. The problem in the wall system, the envelope system, is it never had it. And so all of this paint, weeks after it was installed in 2013, just started peeling off. That's what they're working on today. Still working on it. Page 3 shows that as well. Bottom of page 3 is the basement level. This is the upgraded, luxurious, I'm being a little sarcastic, superior quality building. You'll see that those are exposed steel frames that were spray coated. That's not luxurious. That's inefficient and inexpensive. Page 4 is again the basement area. You can see the exposed beams, and what was done is the new carpet patches, new lighting system, and a few sound deflectors, and the rest of that is equipment that was installed. These particular walls on the top of page 4 were existing walls that were just refinished. Page 5, the top of page 5 shows a cable rack, cable tray. This is the $826,000 at work. This is redistribution of cables throughout the building from the server room to each station. This was what had to be redone. It's not marketable, it has no value, it's a business investment. If you're in that business, it's an expensive proposition. Bottom of page 5 is a workstation, and you can see that there's no modifications to the structure. What they did is they just installed a open work system. Page 6 shows the outside of the building, and this is prior to the 2018 renovation. And what you can see on there is the peeling of the paint. This is the paint that was installed in 2013, which began peeling immediately because of the lack of the thermal break. Page 7 is, the top of page 7 is the basement level prior to renovation, and it was just used for hoarding. And those are the walls I was speaking of that stayed up and that worked around. The bottom is a fiber optic cable installation, which is a business expense, which is included in their expenses, just to show you the scope of what they're doing with their work. Page 8 is the paneling and the electrical upgrade. And what these are is that there's on the top picture, page 8, to the right side, there was a new transformer required. the silly thing about it is, with the efficiency in modern computers, we look at Kara's laptop there, that thing draws virtually no power. But if everybody had one, you'd have to install extra outlets. They would draw way less power than the old ones. But you have to put in more power to your building. You have to have capability in your distribution system. It isn't about how much you draw, it's about how many distribution points you have. And because they are dense distribution points, because they are basically a call center style operation, so every station has two electrical distribution systems, one for their monitors and one for the telecom, and then they share a lighting system from a third system. You need to bring in more main power, more panels. All these panels were new and part of the business requirement.
Page 9 are exterior shots of the building, just from our records. Page 10 is the upper level, and this, just to give you an idea of the finish they used. So the upper levels were finished in this fashion for hydro. What was changed is the floor tiling, and there's a nice little picture looking down at the tiling. They went to this sort of tiling. This is what everybody's doing now. So if you have a spill or a burn, you pull out one tile and you replace it. New carpet. On the upper picture, the left-hand side, those were existing office spaces that were replaced with a glass partition system, and in the ceiling was a T-bar ceiling where new paneling was put in. Now, page 11, oh, I do have another picture elsewhere. Just scroll on to page 12. This is just the finish.
This is just big open office. This is not luxurious office.
Page 13 is a date stamp, and it didn't come out clear, but
This is date stamp. This is my inspection. This is the original window pane.
and if you can't read it properly or read it clearly, because my picture is bad,
Just take a look at the manufacture of this. This is an old style 1977 aluminum pane, dual pane window.
so as I mentioned, I think the 5 were blown seals and were replaced. Page 14 is the where we see some of the structural steel where the stairwells had to be redone. And bottom of page 14, that's the main entranceway, by the way. So that's a structural steel stairwell that's covered with vinyl tile and rubber fronts. I think I recall going to 1345 Waverly and looking at the beautiful wood finish. There's none here. This is all functional. This is institutional grade. Page 15 is the main reception area. Yes, and and this is on what's called level 1, which is the mid-level. And this was during construction when the paneling was out. Page 16 is our lower level prior to construction. And the reason for showing you these pictures is if you compare page 16 with page 3 and 4, that's the same ceiling. So it gives you an indication of the scope of work. Now, you'll note that page 16, the top of the cable tray is the same cable tray in the other one, because that was a cable tray work that was done for the middle floor and the upper floor and mounted in the basement. So that was part of the scope of the first work. Page 17 shows the ceiling tiles. Now, when they did the work for 2 and 3, they took all the ceiling tiles downstairs and decided which ones they could salvage and which ones they wouldn't salvage. And they salvaged a great deal of them and replaced ones where they had to and for consistency. And when we started looking at rents, this is what we would call, I would call maybe an institutional quality office building in an industrial neighborhood. We went around and searched for the same. And we had a number of rents from, listed on page 17. Just give me half a second here, I wanted to. Additionally, this building has been through hearing upon hearing upon hearing. We also looked at, pages 18 and 19 are excerpts from the Johnson report again. And these were from a different, these were deals that closed. Now, remember earlier I brought up Johnson and I said that these are the vacancy and here's the askings. In 18, 19, and 20, these were deals that closed. And the closing price doesn't necessarily match the asking. These, in some cases, these were accurate, and in other cases, they weren't able to be verified. But I think Mr. Diamond's question of earlier gets answered when you look at these net rents, class by class, how the upper level classes did achieve a greater rate. And 1345 Waverly, which incidentally we have listed at $15, that's what we thought the closing amount was. That's the suburban B, and then you go to the suburban Cs, and they're ranging from $9 up to $13 on closings. Sorry, there's one at $15, but that's a 500 square foot, and that's retail, it shouldn't have been in there. So a bit more support for the, if you want to look at rent rates, and the assessor asked me a question when I handed out the rebuttal, are you relying on the rents here? And I said no, because I know they were asking. But on 18, 19, and 20, we are relying on those rents. And this is what Mr. Johnson collected for closings. There on page 20 is the closing on Waverly, and he has it at $18 for the second parcel. That's the number that was reported to him. Page 22 is excerpt from the first go around with this property before it went to I'm sorry, this is a 2018 hearing, before the renovation occurred, and I included the assessor's workup in here mostly because I wasn't so much objecting to several of their rental rates, because I didn't have them in my system. And on page 22, we had several buildings located close by, such as 895 Waverly, where we had rents. They reported between $13 and $13.50, and we manage the building. Or actually, one of my clients owns the building, and the actual achieved rates are a bit less than that, but that's a more comparable building. It's newer, and it's got better curb appeal, and it's got grade level, but it's been more pertinent for relying on that building. Also, they included 1080 Waverly, which is retail, and 1150 Waverly, which are the buildings at the corner of Waverly and McGilvery Kitty Corner to that Safeway Investors building. And you can see the achieved rates in there were $10.65 to $13 within our reference years. So they were more pertinent in application than the ones at the higher end. Our issue with the assessor's rates is that there were just a few in there that should never have been in there. And they had some good rents in there that I found to be quite reasonable. And they would have established a much tighter range on somewhere between $10 and $14. We've included our previous submissions, and then actually this is post-reference, so it's not, I'm just reading ahead here. As far as capitalization rates are concerned, we had sorry. Page 30 and 31, that's the brief I guess we should have been looking at. This is the first submission to the board prior to the renovation. We're just, I guess the people who put this together are just lazy and put everything in both reports. So page 29, this is the original border revision for our reference here, and you can see that we were consistent, $12.50 on the upper levels and $8 for the unfinished space in the lower level as storage. The rents that we use, there's some more rents here, page 30, and we had the ones we listed earlier, and then had additional ones such as, I'm looking at page 30, halfway down the list, 1580 Taylor, 5 Scurfield, 895 Waverly I mentioned earlier, 1000 Waverly, which is also known as 1558 Wilson, and then 1080 Waverly, which is the strip mall with, there's a vet in there and a travel, and there's also office. 1100 Waverly, which is the industrial mall that was leased by Hydro, but was converted mostly to users, to office users. And the one that I thought was of pertinence, I think you heard me mention earlier that Payworks had looked at this building, and the space that would have worked for them was taken by Tower Engineering, and that's listed at 19,594 square feet. That went for $7 a square foot. And Tower Engineering's in there now. Now, they did spend some of their own money on TIs, but that was a shell rental rate. You can see that when you look through the rest of the rental rates on Waverly, they went as high as $14, but most of them gravitated, that was just the one. The basic issue in 1100 Waverly after it was vacated by Hydro was you could lease your shell for $7, or we'll build it up for you and give you a TI allowance and bring it to an average office standard, and the rates will be $11. The city of Winnipeg is actually in one of those spaces. I believe it's the 7,500 square feet at $750. That's their mixed-use office recycle bin depot. And then 1150 Waverly down the street at $13.75. What the flavor here is just to understand what we're looking at for quality, to make sure we're looking at the same ones. On the cap rate side, this is on page 31, and this was reproduced without editing, so the first one, 240 Graham, is out. That was, upon review, there were 2 interests in the building, and we didn't put them all down. Next is 262 Taché, element of owner occupancy, but a related company that capped at 10. 233 Kennedy downtown, that's medical arts, it was a basket case. You can see it was actually 15.8%. 777 Portage, which is one of my clients' site, 8.1%. And that included, there was a sale at $2 million, and then there was a redevelopment on it, and then a new lease drawn up with a new tenant. And the calculation of the cap came to 8.1%. They incidentally used to own 1565 Wilson. That building has a little bit more potential, being, again, not a bi-level. 240 Kennedy, this was a sale that the owner built the building and occupied most of the building, and then sold to an investor and drew up a new lease at the time. So when you look at things like that, the sale is not a strong sale, and neither is the lease. The rate of return is far more interesting, because the parties get together and decide on a rate of return. Then there were a few other buildings. Many of these have retail influences. 1175 Pembina was an office at 8.8 and a bit more dated. 339 Portage is a downtown sale, 9.7, and I was involved in that. Pages 35 to 47 are from the IAAO, which is the International Association of Assessing Officers. the City of Winnipeg Taxation Department is a member. These are their standards. And what we've done is just included some articles about chasing sales. And since we've gone over that ground already, it's very clear that if you're using the income approach, don't chase the sale. And if you're going to use a sale, it says right in here, don't rely on the subject itself. Have it verified by the market. Then zoning is included on 51, and this is M2 zoning, which is a fairly permissive industrial zoning, in that office usage is something that's allowed. It's various types of principal uses are. The only issue with that is if you're looking for comparables, please stick with the same zoning, because it makes more sense, because you can't be in an area where you can attract other uses into this. All of the comps we use, the ones we're relying on, the ones we think are the strongest, are across the street next door. Same zoning, same location. 1100 Waverly, 895 Waverly. And the Collier's cap rate report was presented, and the reason for doing it is the assessor's been presenting it, and we just have to point out that this is the actual cover page from this report. And this is the wrong date, so I'm not talking about references here. I can wait till the next hearing. But this is a promotional blurb. This isn't detailed. But we also provide in here, the assessor had a question earlier about why don't you have C in there, and page 4B. This hasn't changed over the years. We have benchmark definitions. And we have Class A, Class B. And if you look at Class B, which is going to be the same for suburban or urban, buildings competing for a wide range of rents with users in the average range for the area, mix of national, regional, local, lease covenant size 50 to 500,000. Building finishes are good with average systems in place, usually the largest office asset class in most major centers. The subject doesn't meet those standards. It is not a suburban B in the Collier system, and we don't track them, and neither does CBRE. Johnson does though. So, but we would track Waverly, 1345 Waverly. It's slightly larger, but it's a prominent. It's what it has. It's the largest asset class in the area, and it's got a good presence. And it's got you notice that here's a key word: mix of national, regional, and local lease covenants. When they mean mix, they mean we want a multi-tenanted building. Number one, for keeping the vacancy risk low, and because if you lose one tenant, you get another one. You want buildings that will attract a national tenant. Now, who's in 1345 Waverly? Safeway, Investors Group. Who's in the subject? Hayworks. They're not in the same class. And that's part of evaluating buildings. It's not the tenant itself, it's the ability of the building to attract that tenant. And so the rest of this, I see our little graph on the rental rates has been reproduced with a bit greater clarity on page 21B, a bit easier to read. That's my presentation.
Thank you. Questions, Ms. Wong?
I do.
I'm surprised.
Well, Mr. Neufeld provides a lot of information that requires a little bit of questioning. Because it was just said, Mr. Neufeld indicated that national companies, you know, again, 1345 Waverly, Safeway Investors. Is Payworks not a national company? They don't have offices throughout Canada?
Payworks is a company started by John Lavin and.
Barb Gammy.
It's a local company. They do services across Western Canada now. They have an affiliation with, I forgot who it was, but they would not be deemed in that class. When we're talking about a national, it's or that sort of tenancy, it's one that you're going to recognize whether you're in Vancouver or Chicago or Toronto. They would not be recognized. It might be in Saskatchewan or Alberta.
I guess that's interesting. Have you been on their website? Because I was on it yesterday and I was reading about the company, and it was founded by a woman named Barb Gammy, and she's the founder and CEO, and she started the company, and they actually have locations in probably about 10 Canadian cities, and this is where the head office is. So I would consider that a national company, would you not?
No, it's a regional company.
Anyway, that's argument, and the question's been asked and answered.
Perfect. My next question is, are you relying on any of the comparables on page 17?
No, this was just a reproduction of a previous report.
So the panel can cross off these
Yeah,
comparables from their brief?
The one that I was looking at was, as I mentioned, was we had a range of rents, 18 to 20.
Yeah, I'll get there. I'm just asking if
No,
you're willing to
no.
remove these.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And so you are relying on the comparables that were previously submitted in your old brief on page 25, or no, my mistake, 24. Could you actually lead me to the exact
Yeah.
page of the comparables you're relying on, since there's a number of charts?
Yeah, my apologies there. Page 30.
30, so 30 is the only chart of comparables you're relying on?
No, there was more than that, but this was the main one, and this is my submission from the previous, and it's been reproduced later on in the document on page 21B, a bit clearer.
Okay, so, on page 24, we'll go through them individually. These are all the same comparables that you omitted from the previous page?
Yeah,
So we can cross these ones
well,
off?
this was just to show the previous evidence that had been submitted, so yeah, you could
Yeah, okay, so
disregard
page
those.
24 we can disregard,
Right.
page 25 can we disregard?
That's correct.
Okay. I'm just trying to
Yeah,
make
no,
sure we
that's fair.
get things down to the actual topic at hand and what we're discussing, so, because there's, like I said, a lot of information in here. Okay, so page 30 is essentially where we're relying on, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Which is also 21B.
And 21B,
And
it's the
it's
same,
bigger?
it's the same chart, it's just easier to read, I think.
Yeah.
It's-
Okay, so
Thank you.
21B, I have to find it because the numbers are on the top.
It's much bigger.
Okay, so these ones. Okay. And also, what workup are you relying on? The one on your page 1? Because during your presentation, you indicated that the workup that you had been relying on was on page 29. I just want to know where we're going. Are we looking at the workup on page 1 and the information included in that box?
No, we're going to page 1, and page 29 was before the renovation work, and with the state that the building was in, we felt that there were some things that were inferior.
Okay, so that's just that's just the previous information, and
Right.
this is what we're looking at on
Yeah.
page 1?
Yeah.
Perfect. Just because in your presentation you said, oh, this was more relevant, so I just wanted to make sure that I'm on the same page and catching up with things. Now, you spoke a lot about the renovations that had been done, And one thing that caught my interest was you indicated that the outside of the building, from your picture on page 2, was the upgrades of the exterior for the thermal break because of a deficiency, correct?
Repair,
Okay.
not upgrade.
We'll choose to disagree on the
No,
terms.
no,
here.
it's a very clear difference in terms.
So
Repair.
the change to the thermal break in the building, is that due to the fact that it was a deficiency because the building was built significantly long ago when that wasn't really considered typical construction, and they're now doing it because that is what is considered typical construction when building a new building?
It's a mix of both. Proper construction technique would always insist on a thermal break, even going back to the 1800s, there'd be something in there, but it was never codified, and it was codified later on. So when this was put up, when it was constructed, they just built a cheap building.
And would you not think if they constructed a cheap building originally, and they've now repaired, upgraded, however we want to describe it, to the thermal break, would you not consider that an increase in value that would be seen in the market if they had built a cheap building and now they have something with a thermal break which is considered, in your opinion, average or typical of the market?
No, absolutely not. What we're talking about here is a threshold issue.
Okay.
Prior to the repair, you could argue very difficult.
I think no is good enough.
Or impossible.
Okay, just for clarity, when was that repair done?
Pardon me?
When was that repair done?
The thermal break,
Yes.
it's ongoing. I was there yesterday.
Okay, so-
It's still, they're still working on it.
So in 2017, it was not undertaken?
No, they weren't aware. It was, I think it was during those renovations that, post them, that they discovered, they kept asking, why is my paint peeling? Why is my paint peeling? And
Okay.
then they got someone to answer it.
Go ahead, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want clarification.
That's okay. So you wouldn't consider any of the renovations that were done to increase market value at all?
You know,
for
right now we're doing
something?
2017, it wasn't done then, so I don't know if it's pertinent right now.
That's the exterior,
Yes.
but from 2013.
Okay, I thought you were talking about
almost
exterior,
all
sorry.
of the permits, other than the exterior,
Okay.
were done very shortly after the sale took place. So we're just talking about the renovations that took place that the tenant completed, which was, as Mr. Neufeld stated, $3.5 million in the first year of occupancy of the property. Would you not agree that those renovations would have brought it to a higher level of finish,
No,
increased the
absolutely not.
value?
The analogy, let's go back and look at this room here.
Absolutely not is your answer, and that's
No,
fine.
if-
You've said no.
If you tried to lease it,
I think that Mr. Neufeld made clear why he's
Yeah.
maintaining that is, and.
but if you tried to lease this prior to them fixing it up,
Mr. Neufeld, I think he made it
you
clear
just
already.
couldn't lease it.
That's fine, I think he made it clear why you were going that way. Okay, go ahead.
My last question, you indicated that if they were to lease the building out, it would not be to code to have a tenant come in. Did you say that?
No.
Okay,
Uh,
so the building
That's
currently.
kind of a mix of two different concepts that I did say in different, but not connecting them like that, so.
So the building is currently built to code because the current tenant had to file an occupancy permit for.
It's being repaired to code, yes. It's an ongoing process.
Okay, so when you take out an occupancy permit with the city of Winnipeg, does the city not have to come out and sign off to
Yeah.
allow the occupancy to happen, indicating that it's sufficient for use and to code for people to occupy the building?
Yeah, it's, right, there's a process in place.
Okay.
But most of this happens in the design end of it, when they approve the plans, and they'll tell you, they won't come back after the fact and say, you gotta bring in fresh air. They'll say, no, I love your plans, bring in some fresh air, fix the barrier free, that sort of thing.
But doesn't the city come out after to
No,
approve
you-
that all the work is
no,
done and the
you-
permit is
Yeah,
closed?
they do, but the process takes place on the submission of plans. And.
But then the city comes out and confirms all those
A
plans were
competent,
completed.
no, but a competent contractor knows what they're going to be asked, and they'll have to put it in. Me, I renovated my house, and no, I was stupid, I put in an extra sink, and I kept my 1.5-inch line, and they came out and made me change it to a 2-inch line and tear up my basement. Doesn't happen in the commercial world. Commercial world, you get a contractor who would tell you, yo, you gotta put it in.
Yeah, but the city comes out and confirms it and says, stamp, this work has been done, people can be in this
In the
building.
commercial world, there's a different, because what happens in the commercial world is they know you've hired an engineer, and the engineer's stamp is on the line. So
Mhm.
it's a better process, but the
But
point
I'm-
is,
I'm still-
it's adding an additional scope of work that everybody knows now.
I'm still saying, the city comes out and says, you have completed this work, we are approving it and closing the permit.
You know, we know that it's an occupancy permit on
Yeah.
the property, I don't think,
That happens.
It's just, these roundabout answers don't really make it sound like he's answering that question, and I'm
but
just
we're
trying
aware that
to.
the property has not been, there's no eviction order that the property be
Those are my
abandoned.
questions,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, thank
Thank you.
you.
Okay, Ms. McFadden, do you have any questions of the applicant?
No.
Mr. Bass, do you have any questions of the applicant?
I have a question on cap rates.
Okay.
First of all, on Colliers, they just show suburban office, they don't show A, B, C. On page,
Yeah, no,
page
they
8.
they do. 6B has suburban office, A, B, and then a trend line. It's just written out differently.
Suburban office,
And they're going 7 to 7.75%.
okay. And then on this other one, they're
And
going,
the reason that NA is listed under A is that there were no sales able to form a trend. Because the only two buildings that are A's didn't sell.
but, so on 2B, they're going 6.5 to 7.25, and then on 6B,
Sorry, what page are you looking at?
2B,
Okay, 2B, right.
their
Oh.
rates vary from 6.5 to 7.25.
Right.
But on 6B,
Right.
maybe I'm missing something, but they go 7 to 7.75.
Right, and 5B explains the difference.
Oh, okay.
5B is, the ones quoted on 2B aren't created the same way as we would in appraisal or in assessment. For example, the land transfer taxes would be added to the sale price and show an artificially higher sale price, which drives the cap down. That's one element on it. Whereas in an assessment and appraisal, we don't consider the land transfer tax, but the agents do. They also add in the legal fees and the brokerage fees. And in this particular case, for example, the tenant paid the brokerage fee. So it sometimes it's paid by the tenant, sometimes by the owner.
So when we see information published by Colliers, we really shouldn't be paying much attention to it? It's
No.
invalid, is that what you're saying?
No,
It's
what
invalid?
I'm saying is if you're going to look at it, remember first and foremost, it was designed as a promotional tool. When you're involved with it, as I am, behind the scenes, and I see the numbers, what I'm saying to you is that there's a 1/2 to 3/4 point differential in the rate reporting when applied properly. And
So Colliers doesn't apply them properly, you're saying?
No, that's the way the brokers do it, that's their system.
Oh, okay. On page,
Many people use that system, it shows people that caps are better, but you can't use that for valuation.
on page 31, you have sales for cap rates. And you X'd a few of them out.
Yeah, the top one, and, you know, some of them had some limitations. I thought the strongest two were 777 Portage and 240 Kennedy.
Well, 240 Kennedy's right downtown, so I would,
Well, true.
talking about a suburban office building, so I'd X that one out too.
Well, you know, the point is, yeah, you would be attracting the same type of investor, it's got a different location. So, but this is what we have, we were able to find.
None of these on page 31 are reasonably close to the subject, which one are we?
Well, there were no
Physically close.
No, but there were no capitalization rate sales in the immediate vicinity of the subject. This is not just to exclude ones because they didn't like them, they just weren't any.
They're all quite a bit higher than, even on page 6B, they're going from 7 to 7.75. And here it's 10, 9, 8, 9, 8. Do they use different sales, do you think? In Colliers, when Colliers does it, do they use different sales than what you've shown here?
I'm just trying to think of which ones would have populated that list on 6B, 2B. I think what we're looking at here is just the difference in the reporting style.
Okay.
The ones on 31 I developed, and when I developed them, I used the same system that the assessment department uses and the appraisal institute uses. The ones on the other end are, to be truthful, and when you look at the assessor's documentation, page 8, what they presented here are rates developed in the same manner through brokerage firms. So it would take a day or two to go through each one and show you how the difference works out. I'm a participant in the system. I
Okay,
think,
that's fine, thanks. I
Okay.
just was wondering if they use the same sales. That's all my questions, Mr. Chairman.
And I don't have any questions because anything that I've been thinking of remotely has been asked and answered already, so. We're finished with this one. So perhaps we should take a short break before going to the next. It's been a long session and we might have to use the washroom and we have some photographs to make.
Yeah.
assessor promised to go faster.
We're gonna receive, well, hopefully have the same promise from both parties.
Talk about the pot calling the kettle black.
You didn't hear us in the hallway?
We're on.
Okay, on that basis, I'm gonna keep both parties moving from now on. I'm not gonna, we've already heard all the exchange evidence that we require, and we'll remember it or forget it, but we don't have to hear it again. Okay? I guess we're now going on business taxes for 2017. You can proceed when you're ready, Ms. Worm.
So we're looking at file number 18-82 for the roll year of 2017. The address is 1565 Wilson Place. The business assessment ID is 38245 and the owner is Payworks Inc. We have a total annual rental value for 2017 of $848,340 for a total area of 48,795 square feet for an overall annual rental value of $17.39 per square foot, and that includes occupancy costs. Similar to the realty, we have two premises that we assess, 32,530 square feet of upper space and 16,265 square feet of basement space. The base ARV for each of those is $16.07 and $13.42. The cost in 2017 total $2.20, and the total annual rental value of both those premises are $848,340. Page 2, my comparables, they're the same comparables that were used for the realty assessment. They range from $10 to $22 a square foot, and the average and median are $15.33 and $14.75. The bottom chart are basement comparables, and they range from $7.75 upwards of $10.96. There are very few basement comparables, and these ones I feel are inferior to the subject property. My presentation, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Duval?
I think you said that these are the same comparables we went over the last time, so can we just assume in the other, asked and answered the questions I had of the comparables we dealt with, right? Is that fair?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. And then I don't have to ask questions.
Any questions, Mr. Buss?
No questions.
Ms. Buchanan?
No question.
No questions. Okay, Mr. Duval.
This is Mr. Neufeld's permit.
This is the same presentation as well. And same rents, page 30. 1250 was what we're looking for, and that works up to 717,240. The Johnson excerpt, it's the wrong one in here, but you have the correct one, which I handed out earlier. Or actually, sorry, you have the closing one in here, but not the classification one, which I handed out earlier, and I have lots of extra copies presented as well if you need one for this file.
Thank you.
And I think that's fairly simple. Thank you.
Any questions, Ms. Worm?
I'm just reviewing the comparables that Mr. Neufeld presented. I have no questions at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Buss, any questions?
No questions.
Ms. Buchanan, any questions? And I have no questions either. Okay, we'll next deal with the realty for 2018 and 19, I guess we can do it together.
Yeah, I have two separate briefs
Yeah.
just because I'm required to submit them,
Yeah,
but they
that's
are
fine.
identical briefs. The
Okay.
only difference on them are the file numbers because.
Okay, any conclusion we come to in
Yeah.
2018 will, okay, go ahead.
So we're looking at file numbers 18-90 and 18-89 for the roll year of 2018 and 2019 respectively. The roll number is 03071969000. The address is 1565 Wilson Place. I'm recommending to maintain the 2018 assessed value of $9,318,000. I apparently don't have it on the 18 brief, but there are 119 outdoor parking stalls, which is more parking than is required by the zoning bylaw as previously stated. Pictures are on page 2 and 3. Page 4 are the two sales of $5,400,000 and $6,600,000. On page 5, you'll see my comparables. There's other comparables on this one as well because the reference date obviously has changed and the level of value has changed. My comparables on this page range from $10 to $22, and the mean is $14.99 and $14.19. On the bottom of page 5, you'll see the basement comparables, and they range from $8 upwards of $12.37. The highest comparable is in the closest proximity at 1479 Buffalo. I spoke to a colleague who indicated that at 1479 Buffalo, who has actually been in that building, indicated that it is inferior to the subject, as Mr. Neufeld also stated in his previous presentation. On page 6, you'll see the income workup for the subject property. We have 16,265 square feet of basement space at $12.24, and 32,530 square feet of upper space, main and upper, at $15.43 for a blended rate of $14.37. We have a vacancy of 7%, a $7 shortfall, 7% expenses, and a 6.25% cap rate for a value of $9,318,000. On page 8, you'll see the cap rate information. On page 9, you'll see the Municipal Assessment Act information. On pages 10 through 13, you'll see the mailer that was submitted for the 2015 income and expense report, which is different from the previous brief because it's a different level of value. 2013 sale questionnaire on pages 14 through 19, and again on pages 20 through 31 are pictures of the subject property, which I believe very clearly indicate the level of physical current condition of the property. And on pages 32 through the remainder of the brief are the permits that have been taken out and completed to date. That's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Neufeld, any questions?
Yes, I do. I was just curious about one thing here on page 6. You have rents of $12.24 and $15.43, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Was there what was the market change from 2014 to 2016 in the rental rates?
Well, if you look at my comparables from each year, if you look at the means and the medians, and of the comparables, and again, these are comparables that have large square footages, over 10,000 square feet. They're not 500 square feet, 900, 1,000, 1,200. They're all large square footages, similar to the subject property, all in pretty well close proximity to the subject property. So if you look at the two different levels of value and the comparables that are presented, there does seem to be a change in the value, and the rents have decreased in my comparables that I have shown, as well as our modeled rents that have been provided for the property.
So the rents are lower on the 16 than they are on the 14?
We're talking 17 and 18.
No, but the reference years.
Yes,
So lower rents in 2016 than 2014.
that's what they indicate.
Okay. And does your general market evaluation under the mass appraisal system show the same decline in rental rates?
I believe I just stated that our model reflects the same decrease.
Okay, sorry, this is the first time I've seen that in the model, a decrease. That's why I'm asking the question.
Based on discussions with a number of colleagues, the rental rates for suburban offices did show a slight decrease in our model from 16 to 18 reassessment.
And same questions on the capitalization rate as the last property, is that you don't class A and B separate, correct?
No, we don't. We have all suburban offices at the same.
And your rents, you made a comment about 1479 Buffalo and quoted me. Are you sure you want to stick with that comment? Have you been to 1479 Buffalo? That's my question.
I have not, and as I stated in my presentation, a colleague who has been in there indicated that it is inferior to the subject property, and You absolutely said that in your presentation.
No. The rent I had is what I said. But you haven't been to say, you're not aware that there's 3 distinct sets of buildings, including one brand new building?
The colleague that I spoke with has been in all of the
Okay,
buildings.
but you were not aware of this? There are inferior spaces and there are superior spaces on that site?
As I stated in my presentation, I have not inspected that property, and based on information from a colleague who inspected that property, they indicated that the space was inferior to the subject. And that is the only information I have, and that is the only information that I'm
So who's
presenting.
the tenant you're listing in comparable number 2?
Just one moment and let me get my comparables out.
Is that information supposed to be available? Because we always cross off the tenants when,
Well-
there's a public record here.
No, they don't, I don't think they're required to
We don't
provide.
include the tenants, but
Yeah.
I know what it is if you want me to
I'm just
answer
wondering if
the
there's a
question.
privacy issue here. We are recorded, and I know
Okay,
that
well,
we have been crossing them out.
I can see.
And if we cross them out on the evidence, I don't think we should have the oral evidence submitting that information.
We're their property manager, and I think I'm empowered to say that we'll waive the privacy on that.
Okay, that's fine.
According to our records for comparable number 2 at 1479 Buffalo, Unit 200, we have Claims Pro Inc. in our system as the tenant.
Okay, so you're aware that that's not a net lease? I believe you've got 15,600 feet at 1560 a foot.
According to our information and the mailer that was submitted, it says that it's a net lease. And again, that's all the information I have at my disposal, and that is what we have in our system. So if you say that it's
My
not.
colleagues just confirmed with me that that's not the net number. So,
Unless you have evidence to supply to us indicating a lease to show us saying that it's not net, or the mailer submitted for 1479 Buffalo, it, I guess, again, is your word against mine, Mr.
and,
Newfeld.
well, not my word, my company's word here.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Newfeld is on his phone at the current moment.
Mr. Neufeld, right now, if you'll give all your attention to this hearing, please.
I just had the rent roll sent to me, and we are aware that the rent includes utilities.
Again, I don't have the rent roll in front of me, and you don't have the evidence to supply before the board
I just
today.
asked a question.
And I'm,
I-
again, stated this is all the information that I
I
have.
apologize, it just took me by surprise, I hadn't noticed this, and I'm very familiar with this building, so I think it's an error. And then 50 Foltz, that's the same Stuart Olson property, which I believe is owner occupied, as you had in the last one?
Again, you have indicated it's
Right.
owner occupied, and our information show that it's a net rent.
Okay. Now, you had questions, you had said, you made a statement about 1479 Buffalo at the bottom of page 5. You've got a lot of rents there that are at $7.50, $8, $8.50. So you, I said it was inferior, which 1479 Buffalo is
I'm actually providing in my brief basement comparables, and I've indicated that these are basement comparables, which are actually hard to find rents for basement comparables. So I've actually supplied in my brief some basement comparables to show before the board, and I've indicated that based on the information that I have at my disposal and that I've looked at, I feel the subject property is superior to the comparables that I've presented, although I have actually presented market
There are
evidence.
different grades. My question earlier was there are several different grades in this particular building? Of quality of product, of rental product?
I'm not sure what
In
you're asking.
1479, I said that there's 3 different classes of building grade in this.
At 1479 Wilson?
The Buffalo, you're comparable, and you're actually confirming that?
You've just indicated that there's different grades. I'm just showing some basement comparables. That's, again, all the information that I have.
Well, no, I mean, it's when you're trying to paraphrase what I say, I just wanted you to keep it in context.
I didn't think I took it out
The
of
basement-
context, Mr.
The
Newfeld.
basement comparables at Buffalo are inferior to the basement in the subject.
No, you had indicated that
That's
you
what I
felt,
said.
when you looked through your comps,
Which were
you
basement,
felt,
which were basement comparables.
you didn't provide any in your previous evidence basement comparables, and if you did, you didn't state it. And I was talking about the fact that when you provided your comparables, when you looked through your page, that you felt 1479 Buffalo was inferior.
The ones I presented, which were basement comparables. Now, I just want to say, when you try to quote somebody else, it's,
It wasn't-
they want to make sure that everyone gets it right. Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Buss?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Van, do you have any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
And it's the same property, and I think we've been through this before, and I don't have any questions either, because I think they've been answered in the previous. Thank you. So, it's your turn. You're not gonna give rebuttal again. I think the rebuttal you gave last time was suffice.
As long as we acknowledge that.
We don't have to hear you twice. You're under
Okay,
oath,
all right.
and anything you said, and anything, questions have been asked.
It's been, for the record, it's on the record.
It's
and
on the record,
it
it's in our-
refers to all the properties.
Okay,
all the
fair
hearings.
enough.
That's all, yeah, that's
I just
fine.
wanted you to be aware that we don't require it again.
I understand, yes, that's fine. In this particular property, our valuation of it, and we looked at the numbers again, and didn't see any difference in value that they're getting for suburban office. I think the massive market impact in South Winnipeg has been the hydro relocation, and it's a 5 to 6 year absorption issue, and that's gonna impact the market. And I think in 2018, we're seeing some better numbers finally coming up. In 2016, there was just too much out there that hydro had vacated, over 200,000 square feet on this property and 1100 Waverly alone. And plus their own, another office they had on Clarence, and their owned offices on Taylor, and that was all pulled out and put into the downtown office building. And when you have that great a vacancy, it takes a while to absorb it all in. So we have not seen a difference in those numbers until 2016. And why I suggested it takes 6 years is because you're going through a typical 5-year cycle of leases. All leases are written for 5 years, and then there's it takes a year to find a site and make the deal and then move in. So when you're trying to attract new tenants or tenants to move over to your site, you have to wait for their expiry where they are in order to attract them to a site. And it's fair to say that South Winnipeg is a greater, more popular area with tenants than other parts of the city. But if you're renting a spot in northwest Winnipeg and your lease expires in 2014, you're not moving in 2012, you're waiting till your lease expires. That's the market impact we've seen in this area. And I think the assessor has shown that by their decline in rates, which I think are a bit off the mark. I just don't think that they were strong to begin with. They were always hovering. Well, actually, again, I have no real exception with all the assessor's data except for the inclusion of the superior properties. The rest of the numbers are a good indication of the market of that $11 to $13 range of rents that have been seen, and which were continued to be seen from about 2011 when hydro vacated to late 16, early 2017. I just saw a deal that came in 2018, which is seeing a return to market normalcy, but that's not our reference here. So our numbers, which are shown on again on page 30 they're listed, and on 18, 19, 20 we had the assessor's brief on page 22 from this year, which again we have no real concern about them, except with the inclusion of 1345 Waverly being far superior. And the others show that the range I mentioned of 11 to 13 to some 14, and some small spaces, retail spaces going for higher rents. And I also note that the assessor and myself did end up using a lot of the same comparables and the same reference years. So I say no change. So the number we've prepared is, I believe, the same number as we put in for 17. The same market pressures were in place. Just double check that. Yes. We're looking at the same capitalization rate, no change. What you can take from market reports of cap rates is, I told you that when a broker makes up a cap rate report, they do use a different system. But one thing that you can look at these cap rate reports from market practitioners is the trend line. And you'll notice in all of them, and I'm talking about page 2B here, where it says the trend, flat, no change. And so making the rates up is slightly different, but the trend, once you've got a rate going up or down, that's important. So there's been no change. And I know that the assessor is having a slightly more aggressive rate than that. The market evidence suggests no change. And then that same information as before, and a copy for your records, the rebuttal on the classifications.
Thank you.
And two.
You may have two. I have three.
Yeah.
Spare.
Any questions?
I will try to make this very quick. Mr. Newville, you indicated that everything is the same?
We're using the same value, yes.
Okay. So page 18, this chart of industrial office rents, you indicated previously that you were not relying on this. Can the board and myself cross it out of the
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. On page 24, again, that's the same chart. Can we cross it off of our brief and not pay attention to it?
Yes.
Page 25, can we cross this off
Yes.
as well? So again, the rents that you're relying on are on page 30, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any leases that you've shown are in 2015 or even the early 2016, considering the reference date of April 1st, 2016? Or do you just have 12 and 13 and 14 rents, which are the same as that was provided for a different level of value?
On page 21, we have some leases that rental rates that were achieved across the city in the different classes. And the dates on these are 13 to 15. The 2013, I should say, to 2015. And the achieved rents range from $10.50 in the suburban C to $12 in the suburban C, and the suburban B was 18 and the A was 13 and 14.
Okay, my question then, for suburban C on all of these pages, it looks like the only one listed is 1313 border.
No, 530 Century is listed. There's a break in the page.
Okay, well, with respect to 1313 border, is that anywhere near the subject property? Where is it located?
It's located between, I guess it comes off Century and then runs up to Notre Dame.
And what type of building is that? Would you consider it similar to the subject?
Well, 1313 Border, its first cleaner in, the year it was built in 1975, going through school, and it was built and designed as a suburban office, a multi-tenanted suburban office. So, yeah, the difference being is it's a multi-tenanted property.
Is it 1 story, 3 stories?
It's you call it bungalow style, it's all at grade.
So it's 1 story, all at grade. So it's a very long building
It's,
and has lots and lots of tenants, correct?
yeah, yes, that was the concept behind it. Actually, Transair was the first major tenant when they were still in operation, and that's where all their airline office was in.
Are there separate entrances for each of the
Each
tenants?
unit has their own.
So it's sort of different units instead of an office building where you have a lobby and you go in and there's different floors?
Yeah, but that was the design, it's just private entrances. There is a central access hallway, but the main entrances are from outside.
And 530 Century and Keniston and 3025 Portage, are those anywhere close to the subject property?
530 Century is located at the point where King Edward and Century branch out, and it's the island in the middle. So it's, I would guess, a few miles north. Keniston is located at the corner of Keniston and Grant, and it's about a mile and a half northwest. This is what our market, if a tenant was looking for space, this is what's on the market in the suburban Cs.
And then my last question is, this information is from the Johnson report, correct?
Yes.
So you haven't actually looked at any of these leases, you haven't looked at any sort of information with respect to these properties to verify that the information presented by the Johnson report is actually correct and factual?
No, that's incorrect. We do verify the report. When you look at these sales, for example, we manage 530 Keniston, we manage 1661 Portage. I get the reports for 1780 Wellington, and I'm just trying to grab a handful of these. And we are actually also in the business of supplying Johnson with his data as well. It's a fairly reliable source, and it's more reliable than city questionnaires, because there's someone actually knocking on the doors and talking to these people. And if a user of this information had an issue with it, remember that the people who use this and buy this report are industry practitioners, and if there's something incorrect in it, Johnson fixes it.
I was just asking if you had personally verified all
Yes,
this information.
many of these, yes.
Okay.
The
I think those are
participants
my
are
questions.
voluntary.
Thank
you.
They participate voluntarily, not under force.
Mr. Best, do you have any questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Quoting you, you said this area, meaning the south area, was more popular with tenants. Did you say that?
Well, the southwest Winnipeg has been a better area for all types of uses. It's greater demand if it's where people want to go.
So would it follow therefore that the cap rate should be better in this area?
Not in this time of year, because this was still, a recovery period, and we're talking cap rate office too. So
But
you have an office product where you have the massive vacancies, it's not gonna recover for a while. The cap rates would be better for retail, because it's super high demand.
Okay, that's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Van, do you have any questions?
I have none.
And I don't either. So let's do the realty, let's do the business now.
Okay. So we're looking at 2018.
No?
Business assessment file number 18-83. The business assessment ID is 38245. The address is 1565 Wilson Place, and the owner is Payworks Inc. I'm recommending to reduce the 2018 annual rental value from $901,860 to $815,700. The reason being, when the supplementary adjustment was sent out for the realty value, the person who had put the information on the system with respect to the renovations forgot to carry forward the information from the realty to the business assessment. So the rate that was applied on the business
Okay.
assessment was higher than what was on realty. So all I've done is match the $15.43 to what the actual one that was presented just a moment ago for realty.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Neal?
Just, we can confirm this is all the same data, we don't have to ask, all questions have been asked and answered?
This is all the same data from my 2018 and 2019 briefs.
Mr. Buss, any questions?
No questions.
Mr. Tyler, any questions?
No question.
And I have no questions. Mr. Neal?
It is all the same information, and no need to present it twice, and I just reserve a short summation for all the properties.
I guess I have a question on this. The only thing is, it seems like you're using the same rental rates. Oh, I see, your costs are different, okay. Got it, okay, thank you, I answered my own question.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
can I go through the exercise of asking the questions to cross off the non-pertinent information of the columns from Mr. Newfeld's brief, just for the record?
go ahead.
Is that all right?
Yes, I agree on all of them.
Okay, just making
All
sure.
the ones that we crossed up before are crossed up this time. And
Perfect.
I can indicate to everybody they will be disregarded by our
I
panel
just wanna
and
make
make your
sure.
decision. Okay. So I think that
I'm
we're,
just gonna have a brief summation,
go ahead.
but I'm waiting for the assessor to see if she's got one first.
Yeah, I was just waiting for direction from the panel to
If you have
go.
a submission, you submit, go ahead and make it right now.
Perfect. So in our opinion, we're looking at a property that was sold. The property that we've applied, we are not chasing a sale. We have provided market evidence for office space comparables that are not including retail or industrial. We've included a number of office comparables for the 2017 level of value, as well as different comparables for the 2018 and 19 levels of value for similar office properties in the subject location. Mr. Neufeld himself has verified that he has used a number of the same comparables. He has verified even he agreed with the previous assessor's comparables that were provided in the brief submitted for previous hearings, which are a number of the same comparables as we have shown. We have shown comparables that are over 10,000 square feet for office properties. Similar to the subject, we've also provided basement comparables, which we've identified as basement comparables. This is a property that sold for a significant amount of money. This is a property that has been renovated, in our opinion, significantly. We have shown photos of the interior of the property. We have, in our opinion, provided comparables that are either of similar quality or the subject is superior to. And so we believe that the valuation that we have provided for the 17, 18, and 19 realty levels, as well as the business assessment levels, are appropriate.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld?
This building has been a contentious tax appeal for, since 2013, when the owner bought it. Now, I respect what the assessor's saying, she's not chasing the sale, and I believe her. But the department is, and it's not just this particular assessor, it's other assessors and supervisors. They think that there's some smoking gun behind it. And the point is, it was a forced situation. I know you're gonna look and listen to all this and make your own decisions, but this speaks to the motivation of why are we here today. And I'll show you where that has been leading to. When you start getting fixated on that it's worth more, you forget about the market. The assessor's data, she's quite right in that I agree with many of her comparables, many of the previous assessor's comparables. But then what they do is they slip in some ones that are excessive, such as the Stuart Olson owner-occupied one. Last hearing, they brought the 24/7 owner-occupied one. And then they also have 1345 Waverly, which is superior. What you do with that is you artificially inflate your means. And the best comparables, 895 Waverly, 1100 Waverly, 1000 Waverly, or 1558 Wilson, all in the area, all hitting that range that we've demonstrated to you. And but as I said, this is the fight we're in, and every year that we've got here is under appeal at the municipal board, either by me or by the assessor. So I hope that doesn't scare you off from looking at the facts. But the bottom line on this, in my opinion, is think of the quality of the building. We have a building that is a bi-level building. In the residential world, if you try to sell a bi-level house, you know that they sell for less than bungalows, because nobody wants a bi-level. Guess what? It's no different in commercial real estate. Everybody wants grade level. It is an undesirable building, it's an obsolete building, and after their purchase, which was forced, they had major expenditures that they weren't prepared for, and they got what they got. And you know what? That's business, that happens, they took the risk, they're paying their penalty for it, they're paying their penalty in costs. And all I want is, I just don't want them to pay the penalty in taxes. Remember what this building is, it's an obsolete bi-level with a ton of problems that continue until this day, and the best comparables are right next door. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for everybody for being brief on once we got the incidents the first time, which was painful.